Hello everyone, and welcome to Fleet's Random Ramblings. 78. Yeah, 78 of these things. God, we really are cracking up the numbers, aren't we? I hope you've all had a fantastic weekend. I know that I absolutely have. And I'm looking forward to taking questions from you all once again on this fine Monday, as we usually do. But yeah, hope everyone's having a fantastic time. Everything should be reasonably okay. Working reasonably well, if everything is as it should be. If I've done everything right, and I think I have. Yep, okay, everything is as it should be. And people are already getting started. Night's already at it again. But then again, it wouldn't be night if it wasn't getting cracking. Right. Ruidon is here, which is good. It's always nice to have people here. StreamerBot apparently ceased to exist on my computer between the last stream and this one. Don't quite know why. So I had to reinstall it. But we're back. I fixed it. We're all set. Seems to be working fine. See me back? Well, I'm back.
Yeah. Now, please, I'm getting work, so I'm going to be muted for most of this next 20 minutes.
I didn't go anywhere, Ruidon.
I'm going to I'm going to ask a very important question. You did sign in, right?
Yeah, of course I did. It's working.
Okay. Just checking. I'm not on YouTube, so I can't see it. Just checking. I'm going back to my barbecue.
Well, it's not fixed, Timu, but the bot's never not been working. The bot has not failed me. It's only failed Dr. Clark. Oh, hello. Good lad. Right, so let me have a look and see what the Patreon questions are for this week, shall we? Okay. I am going to wait to answer those questions until I actually have a panel, because those are topics that bear some discussion. So, we shall start as we mean to go on, and crack on from there. So, so we'll start with Discord, then flip-flop between Discord and YouTube. Typical gunnery officer asks, what if the British P-97 Super Jaguar had entered production and introduced it into the RAF? Do you think it would be the best later NATO light multi-role aircraft than the Mirage and the F-16 in the late Cold War? Well, first of all, the Super Jaguar it's not a multi-role aircraft. The Jaguar and any derivatives of it were always interdictor/strike aircraft. They have limited self-defense capability. Compared to other aircraft, but they're not fighters. They're ground attack and interdiction aircraft. Even a Super Jaguar would still be in that role. as I said, it will not be a true multi-role aircraft like the Mirage or the F-16. It's just that simple. 1971. Why couldn't the Argentina get the Dassault Breguet Super Étendard in its carrier? The light fleet can't take them. Too big, too high landing speed, and the catapults fundamentally can't launch them, even if she's running flat out. That's really the long and short of it. It's too big an aircraft for a light fleet carrier. Can't land it and can't launch it. The A4 Skyhawks were about the biggest aircraft she could launch. That's the reason why her Strike Air Wing was solely them. They were the maximum sized aircraft she could fit. Brackman asks, on Discord, what if every Sparrow missile in the Vietnam War gets replaced with an AN-120B? The replacement happens in the air, so technicians are able to look at the new technologies, and the planes getting integrations to fire the new weapons. Once the planes land, everything will be to the state they were before they take off. Presumably more aircraft die, I guess, because the Americans have better missiles, but fundamentally the Sparrow in Vietnam wasn't that bad once they got it working. So,
good morning, Vietnam.
Substituting a Sparrow for an AN-120B is not going to change that much, honestly. Because you're not looking.
Oh, they changed. The Americans already have air superiority.
Yeah, you're just gonna. Where you have failures with the Sparrow, you might not have an AN-120 fail, so you might have slightly more kills, but that's fundamentally not changing the way the war's happening. Nor is it really affecting doctrine or development. Especially if they have no knowledge of the fact they're firing Super Sparrow rather than Sparrow. As you've said, they have no idea this is happening, because the replacements happen mid-air. And no one knows anything different. So you've fundamentally not changed much of anything.
It's about how much air-to-air was actually done in the Vietnam War.
There was plenty of air-to-air knocking around. Like there were plenty of engagements between MiG-15, 17, 19, and 21, and F4, Crusader, F100. There was a lot of.
The majority of engagements were surface-to-air.
No, there were more air-to-air combats than people like to give credit for.
I will point out, though, that if I'm parsing the question correctly, if you are replacing the missile mid-flight with the superseding version, you may not troubleshoot the initial problems they had with Heat Seeker.
Well, no, these aren't the Heat Seekers, these are the Sparrows. These are the radar-guided weapons.
Sidewinder's the Heat Seeker?
Yes, Sparrow is the radar-guided weapon. Well, either way, we've pretty much hammered out that question. It's not really that difficult to answer. Moving on. YouTube question. Bloody hell, they really are going nuts today. 1971, if the 5.1-inch 50 caliber gun project worked by ends up as a 5-inch 50 caliber gun, as it would get the best bits of the 140mm and 133mm guns, but also the issues of producing like the 133mm gun. Wouldn't the same mounts as the 140 and 133mm gun be what the 127mm gets, and won't it be a dual-purpose gun? You're talking about changing development. You're talking about a significantly longer barreled and heavier weapon. So I can't answer that question about whether it's going to be a dual-purpose gun or whether it will get the same mount, because you would have to basically... You'd have to run that development program to figure out exactly what you'd get. And without running it or simulating the running of it, it's very hard to say what you'd end up with. And also, I'm just going to say this, Knight, please stop transferring questions from Brew Ships to Ramblings. They are two separate shows. And I'm not always there for all of Brew Ships. Nor is Dr. Clark here for all of Ramblings. So please stop transferring questions like ping pong balls between the two shows. Because context is lacking and key points are missed when you do this. Gunnery Officer asks on Discord, opinions on the £6 gun. Do you think it's better than the M3 M6 75mm gun for both the AT and anti-obstacle or anti-infantry role? It's a better AT gun. That's not up for debate. But as a general purpose anti-obstacle and anti-infantry role, no, the M3 M6 is better. Basically, it's really that simple. It was born out during the war. Nice. Oh, that's the same question. Ruin von Bismarck. The meteor that caused the Tunguska explosion lands in Germany in World War One. Which region would it have to blow out in order for the war to be concluded as quickly as possible in an Entente victory? Berlin. Decapitate the government. The Germans have to sue for peace. Because at that point, there's no. No, this is World War One Germany. That's a disaster that the planet has never seen. At that point, the
World
war.
War One still had distributed command and control.
It does, but there's
most of high command isn't in Berlin.
Yeah, but
If
yes.
you want to end the war quickly.
Yes, our
you hit the city of Essen.
No, Foxo. The capital's gone. The driving force behind the German war effort is basically removed. The Kaiser's gone. The upper echelons of government are gone. And a large transfer hub and population centre is also gone. You don't continue a war at that point. Especially not a war like World War One, where it's not an existential conflict.
Most of the government at this point isn't situated in Berlin. Most of the civilian government is, but most of the military government and armed forces high command aren't. Right? Well done. You've just gotten rid of the civilian government and you've turned Germany into a military dictatorship.
I mean, that doesn't...
Or a military that's pro-war sees this war as Germany's last chance at being the global superpower and has the belief that if they don't win it, that the Russians will modernize and overtake them and become the dominant power in Europe.
Well, that's the case
and you've
without,
just taken out the civilian side of the government for them.
Yeah, but no, I'm sorry, Foxy, you're thinking as though a meteor hasn't just obliterated.
But military command's still intact. The Kaiser's not dead.
Don't give a... You are not thinking straight, woman. For God's sake. The capital of the nation has just been obliterated by a meteorite. Regardless of how warlike the members of the military government now are, they've just lost their capital. They've just had... The culture shock alone would be enough to call for a pause in the fighting.
Why?
The city has been evaporated off the map.
I'm sorry, what's the question? I just got here.
Where would you hit in World War One Germany with the Tunguska asteroid that hit Siberia to end World War One as quickly as possible?
Berlin.
Like I said, yeah. Foxo,
I fundamentally disagree with you.
You're misunderstanding the impact of what's just occurred. It's not like Berlin has suffered a bombing raid. No, Berlin is fucking gone. The cultural heartland of Germany is gone. And it didn't die because of outside...
Berlin isn't the cultural heart of Germany at this point.
Really?
Berlin's the administrative capital.
Even so, it's still... the capital has gone. It's just, and millions are dead in the course of a single afternoon. That is a nation-shattering event in this period. Especially a nation involved in a large-scale conventional conflict, which Germany is. If the military high command say, oh, you know, the capital's lost, let's keep fighting, they will find themselves overthrown incredibly quickly. Because it's one thing to lose a city to an enemy attack. You know, that's part of the war, they can use that to galvanize themselves. It's another thing for a random act of God to wipe your capital and everyone in it off the face of the map.
Yeah.
That is a situation where...
But Germany's not going to surrender.
No, but it will basically end the war. Because it'll be paused...
Why would it end the war? Why would Britain and France stop?
There'd at least be a ceasefire. Whatever.
The French want the Germans out of their land. The Russians want the Germans out of their land. It's going to put Germany at disadvantage, but it's not going to do anything to stop.
Yeah, it is. You're just...
The
you have no concept of how people think. If this is how you're reacting to something like this.
Please shut the fuck up, neither do you. And stop it with the fucking personal attack of the fucking RPG.
Easy there, Jesus.
But, like, they've lost their capital! Millions are dead! Pretty much everyone in
Nations have
Germany...
lost their capital before!
Yeah, but not to a random meteorite smacking it in the face from... orbit.
Okay.
Would seriously wound Germany. It would make it an administrative clusterfuck.
Okay. Alright. We've got the immovable force is hitting the immovable object here. I think we need to drop this and move on.
First, I was going to suggest you hit the mainland. You could kill off most of Germany's manufacturing.
That would
Then
work.
they can't continue the war.
That could also work as well. But
Yeah.
I just feel that the cultural impact of Berlin would be better. But your option is also basically an equivalent. It would also do the same thing.
Culture doesn't stop wars. Lack of bullets does.
Yeah, I mean,
I would point to Hiroshima and Nagasaki there, Foxo, with, you know, culture-stopping wars, but hey-ho.
As the final word, I would...
Oh wait, there's more to this box than I thought. Holy shit.
Okay.
That's quite possibly the worst example he could have used, Fleet.
The two of you. Alright. You both away out your argument.
Oh, Mr. Document.
So the next question is... Gunner Officer on Discord, what if Admiral Spruance was a little more aggressive during Philippine Sea and sent Admiral Lee's battle line westwards towards the IGN fleet with air cover from the carriers? Do you think Lee's battle line would completely cross the IGN during the fleet battle if with a synchronous strike from Mitch's aircraft? The decision isn't actually Spruance's to make. The final call was Lee's, and Lee fundamentally said no. I don't feel confident doing this. So the decision was not taken. And if he had gone west, it would have been a night action, which Lee was not willing to undertake, and which Mitch's aircraft cannot support. It would have been far too close to a fair fight than most people are comfortable with admitting, because you've got Yamato, Musashi, Nagato. I think Drac did a video on this. He answered it in a dry dock, but basically it's actually a fairly close fight in terms of battleship numbers and capability on both sides. And Lee quite rightly suspected that whilst radar would help, the Japanese are still at this point, overall as a fleet, better trained and better led when it comes to night engagements with gunnery. And that could even out the
Well, don't stop on my behalf. Carry on.
could even out the balance. So fundamentally, it would be a far more even match, and it would not be a completely. It would not be a crushing of the Argen. Had the Philippine Sea should have been a lot closer than it was, had it not been for Japanese aviation not being up to what it was during the early war period.
Answer this actually. That's a good question.
Alrighty. That was a thoroughly mid barbecue sandwich.
YouTube Minecraft Watcher. It's May 1941 and Fleet finds himself in complete command of the Royal Navy. What do you change before Hood sinks? Well, first of all, I'm dogpiling Bismarck with the entire home fleet. Because I don't have to obey doctrine. I am just dogpiling Bismarck with the entire Royal Navy. All of it. Because I know exactly where she's going to be. I don't have to guess. Just all of the Royal Navy goes out that's in Scapa Flow, and we dogpile Bismarck and Prince Eugen and send them both to the bottom. Hood then immediately.
Hindsight is 2020.
Yeah, it is. It really is. But I was given. It's me with all my hindsight, so I get to do that. Hood then goes into rebuild because politely, she needs it. And I'd rather have. And honestly, if I send her in now, I'll have her back for the Pacific campaign, and having a 30-knot modernized battle cruiser is actually fairly valuable for the Pacific, especially with operating with the British Pacific Fleet. So that's useful.
Question.
Yep.
Do you send her to the U.S. or do you have it done in a British yard?
I don't.
Yes.
Probably.
The British yards that can do it can't currently building carriers.
Yeah, so she's gonna have to be another US.
The other yard that can do it's already laid down Vanguard.
Yep. So, and obviously, I'm basically not gonna pause Vanguard. I know that her revised design comes out as an excellent ship, but I'm just gonna keep her going because I want her in the fleet by 43, 44.
There's just a couple of planes. Fuck's sake.
So that's my. That's what I want to do there. KGV is coming along fine, don't need to alter them. They're perfectly happy capital ships. Nelson Rodney, fairly active. I probably won't contest with anything other than cruisers and submarines the Japanese invasions of Singapore, because all sending out Force Z does is get it killed. Whether it gets killed, whether it gets killed historically or during the Abdicom campaign doesn't really matter. It dies either way. Because if they're out there, Abdicom won't just be fighting the cruisers that they were. They'll be fighting Japanese heavy units and full fleet carrier assets. And I don't have carriers to send out to cover them. Neither do the US.
I would point out, however, that with future knowledge...
ship that's living out there, you have a senior officer out there, which means that you can get rid of most of the petty power politics that got Abdicom so screwed over.
Abdicom, well, the Dutch East Indies are falling regardless of what happens. There is not enough
cruisers down there. The cruiser captains will actually follow.
What I was going to say was that with foreknowledge, you can flap a couple of butterfly wings and possibly have a carrier that you can attach to Force Z. And at any rate, you have barely enough time to set up a rough, if base, or a standardized, if basic, communications framework between ground-based air forces and sea forces, which could save Repulse and Prince of Wales.
Well, I'm fundamentally not going to put them in that position to begin
Hermes
with.
By a week.
I mean, politely.
Delay Hermes by a week. Well done, you've got a carrier.
That's really not. Fundamentally, the best thing to do is to let the Japanese overrun. Like, offer limited resistance, but don't risk heavy assets you can use later. Because politely, we know that I know I'm going to be able to slap them back. So what's the point in risking assets I can use later? This is where foreknowledge. This is where the brutal arithmetic of foreknowledge comes in. Also, very quickly, just to answer, Knight, it's not that you can't bring up questions you thought here to brew ships and vice versa. If you're gonna do it, we need full context. What brew ship, what ramblings, what question are you referring to? If you're gonna cross-pollinate, we need to know exactly what you're referring to and what the context you want is. If you just pose an out-of-context question like you have been doing over the past few months, you're going to keep getting the out-of-context answers that you have been getting. But very quickly, so moving back to...
Also,
go on.
Just be careful that you're not fishing for the answer you want instead of the answer you got.
But yeah, moving swiftly on. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to forward deploy prior to the Pacific War. All the T-class are going to leave the Med. That's going to be my primary deployments. I'm going to have forces... I'm going to... With the way things are, I'm going to have Repulse at home. I'm probably going to free up 2 KGVs to form the core of my strike fleet. Hang on, when is Ark Royal lost? When is she lost? Oh! Oh no! Okay. Well, first things first, I'm pulling Ark Royal out of the Med. She is not going to be in the Med anywhere in November, first of all. She will actually be in probably Ceylon after September 41 with a pair of Dido class cruisers and 2 flotillas of destroyers. Because politely, I know I'm gonna need her. She is not getting sunk in the Med by some lucky U-boat captain.
You could also possibly achieve that by requiring a certain level of training for cross-decked damage control officers.
Yeah, like if you transfer from battleships to carriers, yeah, you need that. You need that training. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, to try and essentially break the habit of the only person that lets, essentially get them to go from we don't let water into the ship of the first thing we do is let water into the ship.
Well, yeah, that's just basic. That's just don't skip on the transfer training like they did in wartime. That was the problem. The problem wasn't that the training didn't exist. It's just they skipped on the usual transfer training. So yeah. But yeah, well, the best thing to do is I also don't need her, if she survives, I don't need her out of action in November of 41. I don't need her in dry dock with a torpedo hit. I need her ready to go in Ceylon.
I'm just being cheeky and looking for the smallest, most feasible things I can do.
Well, thing is, I'm in command. I can act in a way that's going to limit butterflies. It's one of the reasons why I'm also not trying to change the outcome of the loss of various parts of the East, because that means the Japanese act predictably, and I can then kill the Kiributai. Just outright obliterate 4 Japanese flat tops. That's what I'm aiming for. I'm aiming for a war-winning strike. Well, not quite war-winning, but Japanese crippling strike in late 41, early 42. That's my real commitment to change here. So Ark Royal will form the core. You'll have... I'll try to spin out 3... I'll try to actually free up 3 illustrious class carriers. Hermes and Eagle will actually retire home for Arctic convoy work. Rather them do it, older carriers that I don't really need for active frontline roles, where they're going to be fighting other carriers, than my armoured carriers I kind of desperately need in the Far East. So if I can get a 4-carrier strike group, then I could also probably leave Renown and... Sorry, not Renown. Leave Nelson and Rodney at home. Leave the modernised QEs in the Med. Leave the R's doing convoy escort. Because Nelson and Rodney can deal with... Nelson and Rodney can tie up Tirpitz. The Scharnhorst are in Brest, being bombed to nonsense. So I'll leave Renown and 1 KGV blocking them in. And that should leave me with 2 KGVs going spare. I can use to form the battleship escort for the 4 carriers in the Indian Ocean. And at that point, if I let Somerville do his thing... Nope, if I tip you off about Pearl Harbor, you don't join the war. And politely, I need you to join the war in that spectacular and bloody fashion, so that you're committed. So no warnings about Pearl Harbor. So, yeah. Hit the Indian Ocean raid, so get the first pair of carriers. By the time that the Japanese are arriving, I am hopefully going to have enough mix of Marlets and full Mars to put enough... If I have 4 carriers, I can put enough cap up that I can probably bloody... bloody the strike enough that the armoured carriers will be able to resist it. Particular attention will be placed into making sure Ark Royal doesn't get clobbered. But in theory, once I've survived the first wave, we will then put our own strike package up. Ideally, hopefully, while that's being recycled, I can get some Marlets ready to go for escort. That strike package, which is now 4 carriers size, which actually results in a escort plus strike asset that's similar in size to a Japanese 2 carrier strike. And at that point, if that falls on the 2 Japanese carriers with martlets to keep the zeros off them, that should be enough to cripple or sink at least one, possibly both, of those Japanese carriers. And if I cripple one of them so that it slows down, and the marlet's chewing up the zeros, or at least keeping them distracted so my own strike package can return home and I've still got fighters spare, that then means that I can actually take the risk of closing down that remaining 2 carrier pair, even if it's escorted by a pair of Congos, and letting the destroyers, the cruisers, and the KGVs do the work. And at that point, if I'm lucky, not only might I get both carriers, I might even bag 1 Congo. I don't think I'll get both, because the other one will probably put on speed and run screaming over the horizon. And at that point, you've basically thrown the Pacific War on its head. Which is actually one of the best things I can do. Right. So, that was... Okay, so, Discord question. I'm waiting on Dr. Clark for the Patreon questions, so don't worry, I haven't forgotten them. But like I say, I know that Timu and Brandon do like Dr. Clark to have a look at their questions. So I'll wait for him to get here. His headphones are charging. He will be here shortly. So.
Okie dokie.
Gunner Officer asks, question 4. What if the British produce and introduce the Hawker Siddeley P1200 for the RAF? Do you think it'll be miles better than the F-16, early Hornet, Mirage 2000, and Gripen for the late Cold War? Don't know. Genuinely. It's a concept aircraft. No steel was ever cut. We don't know. We have papers.
2000?
Yeah, 2000. We have we have paper statistics, but we have no credible information, and so without it ever actually flying, it's a fundamentally unanswerable question. If you wanted to ask me a question on aircraft that had prototypes that actually flew, then I can actually give an accurate answer. but with purely paper hypotheticals like the P-1200, it's fundamentally, it's a non-starter.
Actually, I disagree. That I think that's a little bit unfair. Technical data is quite valuable for what we can go off. It's also what a number of other aviation-based YouTubers have to use. Notably, with some of the British stuff in World War II, how they would compare to various aircraft then.
I will point out, however, that while I understand what you're saying,
I'm just looking through it, and it's one of those cases of
if it does anything,
almost seems like an early 4.5 gen.
It is a design study that was later built upon to go towards Typhoon.
Having a quick look at it online, one thing I could say about it is it's quite possibly have a very reactive engine, should I say? An engine that is very responsive, because it's either going to have two RB199s from Tornado, or one RB431, which is basically the Harrier's Pegasus with reheat and no vector thrust nozzles, which was designed for throttle response.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I go, it has potential, but it's basically that standard late 84th gen. It's a similar sort of bird to things like. It's a similar sort of bird to something like the F-16. It's very much in that ballpark. Well, it's possibly actually.
Yeah, what?
Almost like a MiG-19 equivalent.
It is not a MiG-19 equivalent. MiG-19 would be pathetically weak compared to this thing.
Have you seen a picture of it?
If I mean the role.
No, not at all.
I would proffer that once you start getting into the era where governments pay for prototypes instead of manufacturers offering prototypes as the normal, a lot of times why designs never get off the drawing board is politics.
Mm-hmm.
Government doesn't want to fund it. And ultimately, that is a political decision.
Yep. So, YouTube question. YouTube did that. So did that one. 1971 for Dragon and Foxo, as Northern Parliament has been announced for the Azure Lane April mini event. Thoughts? What ships do you want to see?
Proper Project X cruiser could be interesting. I know we've got, I think it's Kursk already, which is a similar thing, but she doesn't actually have the airstrike capability, as I recall. You're probably not going to see Kremlin. That's probably going to be more reserved for a PR9, probably, off the top of my head. We've got most of the carriers going. We've got two carriers with Chekhalov and Admiral Nakhimov, that's it, in PRs. So we might see another carrier, potentially. We've also got Volga from an event. And we'll probably see some sort of destroyer of some description. I can't really see. You might see a Khabarovsk, potentially, of something. Don't remember if Tashkent's in game. I'll need to check if that's later.
The last destroyer Stalingrad.
Yeah, actually, what? Because we've got Kronstadt. Seeing Stalingrad could also be interesting, yeah.
Because those destroyers that the Soviets made purely for Arctic operations in World War II with British help.
Like, there's definitely some interesting designs they could go with.
Gunnery Officer asks on Discord, opinions on the Ram 2 tank. Do you think it is overall a better medium tank than the M4, A1, A2, A3 75mm gun Sherman tanks? No. In terms of ergonomics, fightability, and overall reliability, the Sherman is just better. The hull's better laid out. The Ram was based on the M3. As soon as the M4 comes along, the Canadians drop the Ram as a concept and develop a Canadian version of the M4.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they do. Called the Grizzly.
No, Rams are still in production even by the time they've got Shermans. They keep going for quite a while.
No, they drop the Ram as a tank. They don't drop the hull, but they drop the Ram as a tank.
No, they don't. They keep using them because that's what they've got.
No, they don't. They do because they never use it. They work on Grizzly as their tank they want to actually fight with. They keep building it because they have to keep building something.
So you should tell that to
Also-
Canadian Armoured. Canadian Armoured would love to hear that.
Also, while yes, the Ram definitely has problems, reliability-wise it's not as good, overall, for the fight that is expected in Europe, I would actually say at the time of the Ram's actually better, especially in Africa
Ram
as well.
is not better than Sherman in any way, shape, or form.
Ram never saw
It's
combat.
got the the Ram's got a 6
Oh,
pounder,
this
which
bloody
for
thing
British
about the
use
6
is
pounder again. For God's sake, when will you drop it? The 75mm is better than the
when
6
the
pounder.
fact that when it's not though, because we've literally been over this. We bloody dropped the book on you.
And I will
The
continue.
6 pounders. I'm going to jump in on this. For one, the 6 pounder is better for armor penetration up to 500 yards. Then it drops off sharpish, and this HE's nowhere near as good as 75. 2, the Ram never saw combat as a tank. It was used for crew training in Canada and the UK. The only versions of the Ram that saw combat service were APCs, observation posts, gun tractors, a few flamethrowers were attached to them, but none actually saw service in combat as a tank.
They tried to work on Grizzly, but even then they dropped that in favour of just getting Sherman. They built 188 Grizzly, but I think most of them went to Portugal. Don't think any of them saw combat either.
I think the fundamental problem with Ram is too similar to the M4 Sherman for it to be really considered. Why build Ram when the Sherman's pretty much the same, if not slightly better, and is being produced in the thousands just next door?
Mm-hmm. Although Grizzly did feed...
The issue with Ram is that it comes in, or tries to come in, before Sherman comes in. Because they're looking at Ram in 41 and 40. When the Americans are running around with the M3. And compare the Ram to the M3.
Compared to the M3, yes. But
we're not... Yeah, if
even
this was a comparison with the M3, I'd be back in Ram. But it's not.
Even the M3 was supposed to be a stopgap for US service, but then UK and Russians couldn't get enough of them.
Although, didn't the Russians call the M3 a coffin for 7?
Yeah, they
No,
were.
they did,
Yeah, Coffin
but
for 7 Brothers. They were not too happy with
Yep,
it.
and the British also despised the thing.
I wouldn't go that far,
no,
Dragon.
Yes.
I want to just point out something about the Soviet. A lot of the claims about it being a copy for 7 Brothers comes from one of the translated tank diaries that we now know is just outright fake.
Oh, fair enough. Good to know.
And post-war propaganda.
With regards to the British perspective of the M3, they had a tank that was reliable. It had a decent gun on it, could fire a decent HE shell, which none of the tanks had at that point. Yes, it was big and roomy.
Heavily armoured, though.
Somewhat light. Yeah, and it
it wasn't that heavily armoured, though, in comparison to Matilda's.
But
One
yeah,
at a time.
The main point they liked about it was the fact that it was reliable and it had the 75.
Yes, and then there's there's a hell of a lot of accounts, especially from Africa, where, these vehicles are way too large. They don't have very good armor compared to our Matildas. 75 is in a position that makes it tactically unviable in the fighting we are engaged in.
I didn't say they thought it was perfect. Just it was better than what they currently
they
had.
didn't like it.
I think,
No,
Dragon, that's
they-
not... No, I think that's wrong.
It was better than what they currently had, which was 2-pounder armed tanks everywhere, with the exception of Matilda, light armor.
It's a decent general purpose bit of kit.
Which keep in mind, though, for infighting, especially in Africa, the armor didn't matter because all the rounds would be going through you regardless.
But now you've got a 75 with a decent HE shell, you can start actually taking out the anti-tank positions.
And also, the M3 is a fundamental out of context problem for Panzer III and below.
No, it's not, though.
At range, it is. The M375 will deal with a Panzer III at a range above, I think it's 800 yards, whereas the Panzer III...
Tactical experience was the fact that the 75 wasn't much use in tank v tank combat or close engagements.
The 37 is the gun of choice in the tank on tank because of its position, allowing you to go proper hull down, and overall it being slightly more viable for longer range.
It's just the limited. Admittedly, this is from what's his name's book, and it from Tank Museum, but it was the limited traverse to the 75 that was the issue.
I do feel like, Dragon, you are rubbishing the M.
Doesn't help.
I do feel like you are rubbishing the M3 Lee unnecessarily here.
Oh no, the M3 Lee is a very good tank development, but the British didn't like it.
I don't think that's true.
I'm going to have to disagree with you. They liked it because, one, it was reliable, which, apart from the Valentine, none of the tanks were. It had a 75, better than any of the guns they had on tanks at that point. Yes, they realised it was a stopgap intermediate. This is not exactly perfect for what we need, but at the moment of time, it's better than what we've got.
Also, it's more just. I think the best way to describe it is that it's the first tank the British get in the desert that's all singing, all dancing after the Matilda. So it's the first thing they have that can even approach doing what the Matilda could do. That is to say, it can be an open country tank in the desert. It can be an assault tank. It can be. It can deal with emplacements like the Matilda can because it can. Survive the engagement and get within range for its 75.
No, because if you need to take out a bunker or an emplacement, that's what your close support tanks are for.
You do realise that the close support in the British Army at the time meant smoke, not HE. Any tank fitted with a close support gun in the British Army was predominantly fitted with smoke rounds.
And the thing is, the Matilda did carry 2-pounder HE. And it could, because of its survivability, sit there and actually bang away at in-place positions with its accurate 2-pounder gun and basically death by 1,000 cuts them.
Which, in fairness, 2-pounder HE is more like a hand grenade.
Still, it's gonna, death by 1,000 cuts the emplacements you were gonna find in the desert, sandbags and such.
Before you've diffracted it, and now there's a 18-pounder HE shell coming inbound.
Yeah, and the thing is, what the M3 could do was basically sort of a one and done comparison. So whereas a Matilda could sit there and just take punishment while delivering the blow over time, the Lee could survive long enough to deliver a single round that would have the same effect, meaning it didn't have to expose itself for as long. Two sides of the same coin, basically.
And it could do so for longer range.
Well, the 37 fundamentally can't defeat the M3.
It can.
No, it can't.
It did.
Are you reading German propaganda, the both of you?
No, I'm reading various different accounts from the British Army in Africa.
The 37 can't deal with 51mm of sloped frontal armour.
It can.
At what range?
A lot of the longer 37s had performances.
There is no long 37. There is one 37. There is one 37.
Ammunition.
Oh.
With improved ammunition, had performances similar to that of the 2-pounder, and the 2-pounder can easily.
At what ranges?
Up to 400 meters.
That 75 is going to delete that easily beyond.
Yeah, if it sees it, if it knows where it is.
You're in the desert. It's flat. It's mostly flat, open country. The few hillocks and dunes in the way, but
Yeah,
there's a reason
I
the
would
desert was
tell
known
that
as
to
good tank
most
country.
of the armored divisions that kept getting ambushed, but in the desert by anti-tank guns. But
Also, the fact that a good number of British reports about why they disliked the Lee was because it was so tall. And I keep saying Lee, I do technically mean Grant, because the British did get Grant instead of Lee primarily. Was because it was so tall. It was much more easily visible.
I'm not disagreeing with you on that one. But they did realize it was not the perfect tank. But at the time, what they had previously, the M3 was just better. Not
There's
in all
also the problem
respects.
that the M3 also didn't fit into British doctrine properly at the time. Because British doctrine was cruiser tanks and basically infantry tanks, and the M3's neither.
If you don't use vehicles the way it's designed to, it's not going to perform as well, is it? Shall we move on?
Probably. We're going round in circles.
it was a stopgap until the British Army got what it wanted. And what it wanted was Cromwell.
Yeah, Sherman's better.
I'll disagree with you on that, but let's move on.
YouTube Minecraft watcher. Let's say Scharnhorst survives on YouTube. Let's say Scharnhorst survives World War II and is retained by the US until the 1950s. Dear God, why? When the W1911-inch nuclear shell was invented. Would the US modernize and use her? And if so, would she be renamed? If they're keeping her, they're keeping her as a prize.
Yeah.
They're keeping her as a prize, if anything. And if she's retained by the US until the nuclear shell's invented, A, it's for a different 11-inch gun. It won't fit Scharnhorst guns. Secondly, as soon as they can, they're getting rid of her.
That machinery's almost 20 years old.
Yeah, as soon as
She's probably being blown up in the atomic tests.
Yeah, that's just... Scharnhorst is not a good ship for the post-war world.
Good luck trying to operate that machinery.
Actually, I was about to say she has one very niche use, and that is against the larger Russian surface combatants. And that's it.
But that's only she's operated by the German Navy.
Incredibly, yeah. So...
Yeah.
The US just have no reason to keep her.
Yeah, if they wanted a ship like her, hello, Alaska.
Also, let alone the fact that this Scharnhorst will probably cost more to operate
than an Iowa,
than an Alaska, because you've had to swap out all of the end. Well, not even just the end. You've had to swap out basically everything for American.
Yep.
Which that's a hell of an expensive refit.
Yep. Gunner Officer asks, do you think the Halifax FFH is better designed and more... Hang on, I'm just going to research what this is quickly before I finish the rest of that question. Right, okay.
Well, no, finish the rest of the question so that we can start thinking about it.
Do you think the Halifax FFH is better designed and more capable at all roles like the ASW and AAW than the Oliver Hazard Perry frigates for the mid and late 1980s? No. No. I'm sorry.
Interesting delusions of grandeur with this question. You're better than an Oliver Hazard Perry.
I'm just having a look.
Oh no, I see that comment, Sea Dodders.
Which one?
The refit idea.
Yeah. Stop putting ideas in my head.
Do not do it. Do
Oh,
not
God.
even think about doing it.
Do not do it, because Wargaming might see it and go, this would make a good premium.
Now, Waldor's just posted something possibly worse.
So, the thing with Halifax is basically that in a single engagement, it can do everything a Perry can. but it doesn't have the long-term staying power that the Perry does. Because the Perry has a very deep missile magazine, which all comes out through a single-arm launcher, which can cycle through various rounds at different times, and you can change the magazine depending on what you're doing. Whereas the Halifax has box launchers for all of its missiles, so it has Evolved Sea Sparrow, it has 8 harpoons. So in a single engagement, the Halifax might be fine, but in a long-term engagement, the Perry is going to be better, and for a campaign, the Perry is going to be better. And also, the Perry has something that the Halifax doesn't, and that's the ability to carry and launch SM, so standard missile, of various marks, which is just flat out better in every conceivable way than Sea Sparrow.
Fleet
Got
Dr.
us
C's here.
permission to use Dr. Clark's disapproving stare on Fleet.
Or you could have a disapproving talking to you because he's here.
I'm right!
Hello.
Why are you booing me? I'm right!
Fleet, right, pick one.
Fleet.
I can hear that. I can hear it.
You can't tell me the Halifax is better than the Perry, it's not.
I'm not going to tell you it's better than Perry, but I'm going to tell you they're very different.
The question was if one was better than the other. I've given my answer. I
Well-
know they're
well, yes, but
different,
the thing is,
and that's one of the things I'm
do you want
highlighting.
do you want Operator Perry with its systems in the same latitudes and longitudes as you would have to operate occasionally a Canadian Halifax class frigate?
Oh god, no, of course not. That's what I was going to get to. But I didn't get a chance to because
Therefore,
everyone went disapproving look.
Therefore, if your argument, etc., is you accepted the premise of the question that one is better than the other. You might want to be better arguing that one is orientated around the tasks and operations required of it by the nation building it, and the other one is orientated around the tasks required of it by a nation that's building it, and therefore they're built for slightly different roles.
Well, yes, that
And
goes
one
without...
of the reasons why the selection of things like the
You would assume that given our
like-
audiences...
like the various missile systems and box missile systems, etc., were chosen for the Halifax might have something to do with the system.
Don't patronise me, I know that!
Yes, but you didn't put this in your answer.
I didn't get a chance to because a certain
not-
someone jumped
It's not
down my neck.
It's not patronising. I waited for quite a while for you to give your answer. I was sitting here for a good 5 minutes.
What I was going to lead
You had plenty
into...
of time.
What I was going to lead into was the fact that basically, as I said, for a long-term
But
campaign
you underlined
in
your
the...
whole point now because you made it simple into a simple catch-all of one's better than the other. So therefore,
I
it doesn't
never-
matter what you want to say now.
Okay.
You've already said that point.
As the idiot in the room, and B, the person who seems to moderate these things. I wish we were in person because then I could have a talking stick. I will actually try to mark on this one. Let Fleet finish his point, as roundabout as it may or may not be. Please.
Rui,
Yeah, but the trouble is,
the more he
says-
So what I was going to
The
say
more,
is
you know,
the assumption was, given the way the question was phrased, that basically they would be operating in the same theatre, the North Atlantic, on the same mission, given the way the question was phrased, mid to late 1980s, for all roles. Now I was going to caveat that with, once I was done, but I wanted to let Dr. Clark say what he had to say, by the fact that the Canadians ordered the Halifax as an all-round service combatant to basically fulfill the needs of the Canadian Royal Navy. The Oliver Hazard Perrys were ordered for an infusion of frigate tonnage for primarily an anti-submarine role with a limited air warfare capability, to bulk out the United States Navy's frigate numbers and regenerate their frigate fleet as they entered the 80s. And they did very well. As Dr. Clark has said, they're not better than one another if you look at it from a single engagement perspective. And arguably for a single voyage in a hot war, aka a Cold War gone hot, that's likely not going to be a problem, given the fact that a Halifax would probably not be using its harpoons, given it would probably be in the North Atlantic, and your Soviet surface threat's not going to be that drastic unless they've done something really... unless they've completely broken with Soviet doctrine and have for some reason abandoned their sea control mission in the North Sea. And are sorting assets into the Atlantic for reasons no one quite understands. And I think, from what I'm reading here, they do actually carry reloads for their Sea Sparrow launchers, so they've got more staying power than I thought originally. They're both, to be blunt... Yeah, they're both, to be blunt, 80s era frigates. Of about similar tonnage. To do similar things. It's just the Perrys have followed a different design lineage. Honestly, the Perrys kind of broke a lot of the conventions of what people thought a frigate should look like. Missile at the front, gun in the middle.
Also, there's another small problem. Just a small one. Have you heard of the Iroquois class?
Nope, that is actually a new one on me. Never heard of that.
Your critique of the Halifax is they don't carry standard missiles, right?
Well, no, it wasn't a critique. Evolved Sea Sparrow is not a bad missile.
That's because the Canadian Navy has an air defense destroyer called the Iroquois class when it first comes into service that haven't been replaced. That carried the standard missiles. So whereas the Perry is supposed to slot into carrier task groups and all the things around the various American positions and do the various duties around their missions, but it's primarily filling in and doing ASW, taking lead of that, but also supporting and providing missiles which slot into the other systems which are being done. The Canadians operate on a far more British-style model and almost European-style model of ASW frigates, which will tend to have the shorter-range missiles, i.e. like the Sea Sparrows, like, if we consider the modern frigates, what they're carrying. And then they have an air defense destroyer, which has the standard missiles on it.
Yeah, they started with...
And so this is some of the problem with your critique of them, is that the thing is fundamentally, again, they're built to different philosophies.
Oh yeah, like I had no idea.
I would argue, actually, to an extent, the American philosophy is, in some regards, more sensible for the American Navy, certainly, because they need a massive assets to be able to slot in where they need to slot them in. They need the mass.
And they also need basic capability in air area air defense on their frigates.
The Canadians are basically looking at putting together some escort groups.
Yeah, I can see actually looking at these ships.
That's what they're building.
Yeah, looking at the Iroquois, I can see exactly how that would go together. Never actually heard of these ships before now. So
they're otherwise called the tribal class.
Oh yeah, no, I can see them. Yeah, so
the reason and that also explains why there's a differential between the Halifax class numbers of 12 and the proposed Canadian procurement of the River class, which is 15.
Yeah, because they're replacing
12 and you add on the 4 Iroquois.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, there it is. Oh, cool,
yeah.
Cool. Hey, I discovered a new ship. I always like discovering new ships. It's always fun. Because you learn things.
Also, the Iroquois class are pretty darn cool. If you look at their funnel design.
Oh yes, that is. It is very. It's very.
As built originally, they
had
a V-shaped funnel.
Yes, it's like, aha! I'm sending the exhaust gas in all directions. You shall bow before the V-shape.
It does. It's pretty distinctive.
It really is.
Cross-section terms, it's a frigating nightmare. But in terms of looking cool,
yeah,
it looked cool.
I mean, honestly, I kind of get the. It seems like so when they were built, they don't seem to have been anti-air warfare ships. They seem to have been general-purpose destroyers. But then they came up with the Trump. They came up with the Trump refit. And basically, that gave him 29 SM2MR. That is, if you have that leading a that's enough missile loft capability to basically make your hunting group not an easy target for Badger and backfire. That's basically it's not worth trying to get easy kills on us. It will not go well for you. Which is probably why they did it.
And also, the first question you should be asking is, why do they have 29 cell?
That is a unique number, isn't it? Yeah, that is a fairly...
Okay, so here's the question. How many cells does the reloading crane take up on a Mark 41 VLS system?
That is information I do not possess within my brain.
3 cells.
Ah.
So if I put in 4 slots of 4 rows of 8, which would be 32, and then I take out 3 for reloading, what do I get?
29.
So also, this vessel could reload itself at sea, theoretically.
Theoretically.
Yeah, the system was better than not having it.
True. So that was that. So now that Dr. Clark is here, we can do the 2 Patreon questions. I've been saving them as I always do when we've got a decent panel. So, Timu Locker asks on Patreon.
Isn't that kind of rude to Runon and Sea Dodders and Foxo?
Well, no,
you didn't have and Dragon, that you didn't have decent panels, and Rickaloo, that you didn't have a decent panel till I was here.
No.
I agree with you, so...
That's, I consider that cruel.
No, look, let's face it. We all know that Timu and Brandon do like it when you get to weigh in on the Patreon questions, so...
Okay.
Timu Locker asks, panel's thoughts, and also, more opinions good. And by waiting for you, it gives a chance for the most people to filter in. Timu Locker asks, Panel's thoughts, what would be the most underrated warship of both world wars? One for each conflict. Ships that served in both can only be counted for one of the conflicts. So, underrated for World War One? Probably that's fairly easy for me. That would be Yvuz. She has a fairly active career in Ottoman service during World War One, and it rarely gets talked about. In popular history, I'm not talking about in naval history, but in popular history, Yvuz's very active career in Ottoman service doesn't really get much mention. And she has a whale of a time in the Black Sea and messing around, possibly doing things round the Bosphorus.
I'd say it's kind of difficult to argue a battle cruiser is underrated. Maybe the cruiser that was with her.
True.
Also gets up to a lot of activity.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to argue a battle cruiser. Anything with that sort of title is ever underrated.
Yeah, honestly, Breslaw, probably. Yeah, honestly, that's actually an even better pick. Yeah.
Because you didn't even think of the cruiser.
Yeah, no,
you just went straight for the battle cruiser.
Yeah, no, there you are. Yeah, no. What is she becomes? What's she renamed to in Turkish service? I forget. I'll just look it up.
Oh, I can't even pronounce it from my notes.
To be fair, Clark, that's because Fleet's actually having a bit of an affair with Hope.
Oh, it's Midilli. She's renamed into Midilli.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Oh yeah, she does.
So if her engines lost power, would she be dilly-dallying? No.
She is one of the last ships sunk in World War One, being sunken off Imbros by a mine in 20th January 1918.
After already surviving another mine in her career.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, the Turks did take a chance to actually do something rather far-sighted. They, with experience they'd gained during the war, they landed some of her 105s and replaced them with 15-centimeter guns, which is a fairly, it was a recognition of the increasing battle ranges that they were having to deal with. So has anyone got anything else they want to put in for the World War One slot? But I think that's a pretty good. Pick. Because we just saw an example of why she's underrated. I just completely forgot she existed.
What did she actually end up doing?
So Midilli during World War One.
Basically, everywhere Yavuz goes, she has Midilli with her. So everything Yavuz does, Midilli does as well.
Yep, she.
And a few other things on top of that.
I mean, she nailed one of the. She actually scored a long-range gunnery hit on one of the Black Sea Fleet's pre-dreadnoughts before the Ottomans withdrew. She was the Ottoman fleet was very active in the Black Sea prior to the arrival of the the Russian dreadnoughts. They basically sortied a lot of times.
That is what you tend to do with a fleet, yes.
Funny.
This is going to sound a
depends on the
bit
fleet.
strange, but I think it's the Russian pre-dreadnought Slava.
Oh, Slava.
The pre-dreadnought that
Humiliated.
effectively fought off humiliated a pair of dreadnoughts.
Yeah, Slava. Last of the Borodinos, the only survivor of that class.
Yeah, and it's for the fact that she's a battleship, but she doesn't get nearly enough recognition for what she did.
Yeah, and also she's overshadowed doubly by her 4 other sisters that get lost at Tsushima.
Yeah.
I'll let everyone else do their World War II picks and World War I picks they haven't already done. I need to take 2 seconds to go and deal with Le Dog. Fluffy research system.
I'm trying to remember exactly which ship it was I'm thinking of, but I don't think it's necessarily underrated, just an interesting ship. But I need to find it, because I know it was a Russian one.
Honestly, I think most of the Tsaarist Russian Navy you could say were underrated.
Ah, that was it! Rurik. I actually quite like the Russian cruiser Rurik. Mostly because she's very weird. Because launched in 1906, and finally it was taken out of service in 1923. So she initially served as the flagship of the Russian Baltic Fleet for a short career, made 1 overseas cruise to the Mediterranean, but by that point in World War I, she basically raids German positions, takes naval mines, and takes part in the Battle of the Åland Islands. Where she basically acts as, yes, I'm big and scary. Ignore the fact I've not been able to hit you, but look, big, scary ship. The Russians like, nope, don't want to deal with that. We are leaving. Or the Germans like, nope, don't want to deal with that. We are leaving.
I'm gonna. If the question is underrated ships of World War II,
Posting image now, Ghost.
I'm gonna go for any not an oiler, not an ice cream ship tender of any navy. Also, not a floating dry dock.
Considering when it's being built, it is a little bit more weird, Petch. And also, I do just like the design as well. Personally, it is one of the few Russian ships I actually just think is a visually nice-looking design.
Okay, my pick for World
One
War
thing is, I kind of
II
wish he didn't have 10-inch guns, because I'm not a big fan of the 10-inch caliber, even if I know that was relatively common in this era.
Yes, but it's the pursuit of this should be perfect on paper desire that leads to the 10-inch gun, which then every once they get into it goes, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's perfect on paper in theory. In practice, it's just not.
So to answer a question from YouTube chat, it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Clark, but it's Naval History with Dr. Alex Clark. Is your moniker on YouTube?
I should probably start trying to get questions, I guess.
I'm sure Knight has some questions, and I think there are some Azur Lane questions coming.
So RBG's asking, why is it an armored cruiser and not a semi-dreadnought? It looks a bit like the King Edward's class of semi-dreadnoughts. Because I said its main guns are only 10-inch. Which, considering 1906 launched basically the same period as Dreadnought, it's not even really a semi-dreadnought. It is just a. I would have said.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on, yep.
I have a random question that's just going on. Well, it's being blocked on my channel because the comment involves swear words. But someone has just literally quoted, of course, just literally said, "There's no doubt if the American fleet had been at sea on the 7th of December, the Japanese satellites would have spotted them and allowed them to sink them immediately."
Huh?
Wait, are you?
The what?
They
Sorry.
said satellites.
Yes, they said satellites.
Does
Concern.
this person also believe in bagel-fueled orbital laser systems?
Well, they
No,
already
in their previous
in their previous comment they've been having this argument with someone. In their previous comments, they had said, if at sea it's a massive loss of life because they'll just find them and sink them. And the person responding had gone, "Well, how are you guarantee they're finding them? If the American fleet is going off in the direction I've said, the Japanese fleet are coming from a very different angle. They have to search past the island to find them." And they might well not find them because the American fleet will be moving away from them, and as the Japanese fleet are also at the point which they have to consider turning back for their fuel. Oh no, their satellites will find them, and basically swearing about the person who's arguing them being an idiot, because of course the Japanese satellites will find them.
Okay, I
I don't have to do a video entitled "The Japanese Didn't Have Satellites in World War II."
don't feed
Okay,
the
I'm
trolls,
going to
but-
be charitable here, Rui. I have seen in translated works that satellites is often used for scouts and lookouts.
That feels like a poor
Yeah.
translation, but I think I see what
Yeah,
you mean.
but you know
I
translation qualities can be all over
yeah,
the
I do
place.
vaguely see what you mean.
And it's like satellite, what are they doing? They're satelliting the fleet. They're orbiting and scouting.
You
But
do
even
sometimes
then-
get blind and idiot translations.
Yeah.
I mean,
As someone who likes a lot of Japanese light novels and media, at times you go, was this translated right? Looks it up. No, this very much wasn't translated right.
Are you telling me you don't let ChatGPT do all of your translations?
No, but ironically, there is actually a number of good translation AIs coming out now at this point, so...
So there's some translations that translate things directly word for word, and there's some
Yeah.
translations that translate them as in what the meaning was, the intent, rather than the actual word for word.
And
Hello,
word for
folks.
word can very much be more problematic.
So, did we get... What was everyone's picks, then?
We kind of went on our own ramble.
We went on our discussion.
So, I figured out what the problem... I figured out what the problem was. The fluffy research assistant had spotted another fluffy research assistant out the window, and was trying to engage that fluffy research assistant in a bilateral discussion. Through the glass.
Did you know that the IJN had access to orbital observation satellites?
Real-time information gathering satellites.
And
Is
apparently
this
the American ones were broken.
Is this an in joke that I am not missing?
No, this is a literal comment I've had on my channel.
What?
Which is currently not showing up because the person also added a load of swear words. So of course, with my channel that gets blocked.
Oh, also nice choice. Also nice choice of Rurik there, Dragon.
I will never understand this for people though. It's why they can't. Yeah.
For concern she had such a short service life because, yes, let's start the war. Fights one major battle where she fails to hit anything, but is big and scary enough that the Germans are like, nope, don't like this. Immediately hits a mine and then, there's a revolution on, lads.
Yeah, poor Rurik. Rurik is a design, beautiful looking ship. Probably the best, one of the best armored cruisers ever built. But just didn't get a chance to show what she could do.
She almost has that almost orky design to me. It sort of feels like me and that boys on our way to do convoy raiding.
Yeah, did we get to World War II?
10-inch, 8-inch, 4-inch. No, we kind of got distracted by.
Okay, so underrated for World War II.
I don't know if it should count as a warship, but SS Ohio.
Was it just warships?
I very much do like the three half sisters.
Honestly, you
the
know,
Irish on a carrier form in World War II is actually far more effective and takes part in all sorts of interesting operations. And does all sorts of things, but is constantly, the amount of people who just write her off because they go, oh no, she's not useful. And then you actually look at her history and go, well, for something which wasn't useful, the Royal Navy sure may have put a lot of fuel into her and used her a lot for the war.
In a similar vein, personally, I kind of like Hermes and Eagle in that regard, in their World War II service.
I know this is going to be...
Eagle is an absolutely astoundingly useful ship. It
Um,
really is.
I have a really odd one.
Fleet.
That's not surprising. Look, in a nice way, I can't really make claims about him being odd because I am currently looking at a Beef Wellington t-shirt and wondering whether I should pay £14 for it or not.
So my thought process was actually the German
not Beef Wellington t-shirt.
The small number of German corvettes for coastal convoy protection the Kriegsmarine built during the Second World War, and the role they played in helping move safely merchant traffic from Norway down to ports in northern Denmark. I know it's the other side and all, and we don't want them to prolong their war effort and everything, but the role they played in keeping the iron ore flowing.
But the thing is, nothing wrong with admitting the enemy had good ideas or interesting stuff.
The thing is, though, it's the most undervalued unit, and I would argue that gets ignored, not necessarily undervalued. Whereas actively undervalued, I would go for things like HMS Furious. I'd go for the American side. Quite a lot of their heavy cruisers, especially the early ones, get undervalued in their utility. Alaska's criminally get undervalued in their utility sometimes because if you consider the world they're conceding, they make a lot of sense. It's the fact that the world they're dealing with by the time they actually get into service is very different. If the Alaskas had been rushed through, if the Americans had gone, crepes, we need these things in service as quickly as possible, and had pushed through and built them and managed to get them coming into service in 1941, the American war, the Americans would probably still be wedded to the idea of large cruisers to this day, because it's far easier to justify building a large cruiser. And... the things like the strike cruiser, to get the strike cruiser built, the American US Navy probably going to they're the Alaska class, the second Alaska class, because they'll just be known as these ships which go everywhere with the carriers and basically make sure the carriers get there.
Yep. The next question is, it's Can of Worms from Brandon Larson. On Patreon.
Do that. I want you to go to the theatre at sea.
Yes.
I want you to have a look at the link I've just posted in the theatre at sea.
Okay.
Is this about the t-shirt?
Should I get this?
It's mid. Honestly, it's pretty mid.
It's an honest question.
It's pretty mid.
Fleet, never say that phrase ever again.
I was holding, but the thing is, it could be fun to be wearing on a Sunday on a brew ships.
I wouldn't. It's
do it, embrace it. You know you want to.
I'm still trying to get all the questions from Discord onto the document, so that absolutely says something of this week.
In regards to Japanese 1940 satellites, I'm going to assume this isn't a typo, but Leslie proffers that Scout and Satellite are the same character in Conga.
Yeah, so what Foxo said might be right then. Of the translation, might just be them translating a bit weirdly, maybe.
I would say
that was the charitable answer.
Let's go with let's go with that and forget everything else about it.
So.
I would say from their fluency with English swear words that they are. How do I put this?
I kind of feel like I
read translations.
I kind of send me a DM with it, Dr. Clark. I want to see the madness, but later. We can't afford to distract Ramblings too much because we've got another rabbit hole to go down right now. The last Patreon question of the week. Brandon Larson asks, Oh boy, you've all got your hatches battened down because this one is.
Okay, I have found something which is going to make you all cry.
Can I read my bit first? Then you can make us all cry.
No, look at what I just picked up, and remember, it's the top 10 best World War II battleships.
Why do I get the feeling it's not going to be something that's
Hang
not
on a minute.
Alabama,
Go have a look at the list. advertising.
Alabama, New Jersey, light cruiser, Kirov, first of all, heavy cruiser, destroyer, Grimyashi, Richelieu, Belfast, not a battleship, Bismarck, Tirpitz, Scharnhorst. Okay, you know what? Rare L. I'm sorry, yeah, Rare L for Schleswig-Holstein getting on the list. You know, honestly, that's not so bad. Yeah, rare Schleswig-Holstein victory there.
You know. Also, I'm not even sure that is actually Kirov. To be fair,
No, it's not. It's not. It's not the right. It's not the right superstructure at all.
don't even get me started though
No.
on the whole debate between Russian 180mm cruisers are definitely light cruisers.
They aren't, Jim.
I agree, but so many people come to me with that argument. I
Yeah.
despise it.
Right.
Oh, yes, quite
moving.
good HMS Iron Duke
Your
t-shirt.
question. Your question.
Okay.
Carry on with
So, Brandon
What's
Larson
on
on Patreon asks, and I want you to hold your mouths off the floor till I've finished, because the question is long in scope. What if the Second World War never happened? How does the panel think that the rest of the 20th century would have gone? Would there have been a similar war eventually? Yeah, that's a nice
Yes.
small. That's a nice small compact question.
That is quite easily answerable. We can't answer it. For once, I will actually agree with you. That's not really answerable because how many events are you having to change here for World War II to not happen?
You also have to avoid World War II happening in a different way, because if the Germans don't start something, old Joe is walking his way westward, and that'll be World War II.
Well, no, there's the fact is the likelihood of war with Japan.
Yeah, there's that as well.
It's just you get war, but you might get is a Far Eastern war and then a European war.
Yeah, like
rather than
you'd
World
probably
War II as it was historically.
You'd probably have the Japanese going first, and then old Joe will go, oh, the British and the French and the Americans are distracted. Right, I'm just gonna carve up Europe as I see fit.
Well, the thing is about the Soviet forces is they were not logistically that offensive.
Yeah, they were gearing up for a war, but they weren't going to be ready till 43.
They were not gearing up to logistically support a war. They might want to. They might think they can fight a war, but nice way they had nowhere near the plans. One of the interesting things is we often talk about the sheer number of machine gun growth in the British Army in World War One. What we forget is that in World War Two, the most surprising number is the difference between the number of trucks and vehicles which the Soviet Army thought they would need as they were mechanizing, and the amount they actually needed for fighting a war.
Yep.
The Soviet Army would be a very powerful tool, but which would get about 2/3 of the way through Poland before running out of logistics.
Yeah.
And that's if the Polish weren't fighting back. And as what had happened so far in previous wars, when the Soviet Union attacked Poland, they got beaten by the Polish army.
Yeah, and whatever form if a German government is not aggressive, then you better believe the German government's going to be able to go, sorry, Britain and France, I'm tearing up Versailles, the Poles are getting attacked, we're next, I'm going. Unless you want to do it. Nope, okay, I'm going. I'm going to help the Poles.
And also there's the other fact that the Soviets actually might do something in the Far East as well, because there's the fact that, to be honest, there was the war with the Japanese.
I do like how we said we're not going to answer this, and then we're answering.
Well, that's why I said it's basically impossible to properly answer.
The thing is, the point is, realistically, is you might not get World War II as it was historically, but you're still going to get World War II.
In the 40s. You're going to get something in the 40s.
It'll just be a different...
No, it'll be 40s or 50s, because fundamentally, the heart of the seeds of darkness have been set.
Japan can't wait till the 50s, unfortunately. Japan is on a ticking clock, if they keep going as they are. They can possibly postpone until 43, 44 if they don't take Indochina, which therefore, triggers the US to do funny things. But there will come a point where they basically have to look and go, if we want to do anything more than what we've currently done in China, we have to commit to a fight with the Western powers. And the longer they wait, the stronger the West will get in comparison. So there's going to come a point in the early to mid-40s where Japan's going to have to go, right, we go now, or we don't have a chance.
At what point does everyone start thinking war's coming? Because without 1930s Germany starting to kick things off and starting the gears turning, when people start rearming?
The US and the French... the US...
It does. The British actually start rearming before Hitler comes to power because of the Japanese. The British do the whole drop of... they drop the 10-year rule in 1932, presuming war in 1942.
Yeah.
And they drop all funding restrictions in 1937.
Yeah.
So... yeah, it's been on because for the British, they've been pointing guns at the Japanese, and the Japanese have been pointing guns back at them for about 10 years by this point.
Yeah. And also the French will probably start rearming as well, but with a more naval bent than we saw historically. If Germany is leaning more towards either following Versailles or pointing itself at Russia, aligned with a sort of Polish, Czechoslovakian, Romanian bloc, the French might actually see their way into freeing up more funding for the Navy. I could see that.
I don't.
Because the French army is still a potent force.
The French army is a potent force as long as the French government have actually given them radios which work.
There is that.
And stop worrying about them trying to
coup the that's the other thing, innit? That's the that's the rub, innit? Oh dear.
The French government is consistently more concerned about saving itself than it is saving its nation consistently.
This happens on a shockingly regular basis.
It's like, I try and explain Mirza Kabir regularly. It's not that the Royal Navy didn't trust the French Navy, they had no faith in the French government, which, considering that most of the French public didn't have faith in the French government, doesn't seem like a bad analysis of the situation.
Yep.
Okay, I found a T-shirt which is perfect for Fleet. Unfortunately, it's got the wrong outline on it. But it would do for when he's reading about Hoche.
Hey. Right. So moving on. So we've done the Patreon questions. Now it's back to the Discord questions. So, I will get to this t-shirt in a second. Typical Gunnery Officer asks, what was the thought process on the BMP-3? Why did they arm it with a relatively low-velocity 100mm gun besides the autocannon? If it's only for a missile launcher, then why did they arm the BMP-3 with an 80 GM tube or more? Oh, the 100mm is the HE thrower. And close-range AT. If the 30mm can't do it. Because 80 GMs do have a minimum range for some systems.
Plus, it looks big and scary, and if you're using it for the way it was supposed to be used, it adds a psychological value.
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, the 30mm is going to mess up a lot of things, but a concrete blockhouse is going to be a lot easier to destroy with a HE frag round from a 100mm gun than it is with lots of 30mm HE frag.
It described to me by a friend of mine who lives in Poland, who's done his national service, is that the BMP-1 was the first of its kind and designed to be used to support infantry.
Although it's worth pointing out that
BMP-2s are the ones that have the missiles, but the BMP-3 is specifically designed for a battlefield where there's other IFVs.
I
And you're expected to engage other IFVs.
I understand.
In which case, having a cannon is.
I get where he's coming from, but unfortunately, it's not really like that. BMP-1, they all have the same role for the same reasons. BMP-1 is basically
it's the role that changes.
No,
that's what you need to perform the role that changes.
Not really. They just get better weapons to do the same job. So the BMP-3 is designed to. It's the most basic form of IFV you can imagine. It's a battle taxi with a 73mm gun that's basically there to enable it to engage armor at close range. it doesn't get a HE frag shell until much later, and what it does get is incredibly anemic. The common misconception is that the BMP... Yeah, the common misconception is that the BMP-3's gun is there for infantry support. It's not. It's there to give it a minimum range engagement angle against armor.
It's there against IFVs and light armor.
Well, just armor generally, because the ATGM has a minimum range. The BMP-2 basically switches it up for an ATGM for anti-armor use and a 30mm cannon that can actually do the infantry support role in a reasonable manner, which therefore makes it into a much better IFV. And the BMP-3 is basically them going, well, what if we added a 100mm gun to a BMP-2 and rearranged the crew compartment a little bit to make up for the increased weapon stowage? It really is. It's. I know it sounds a little bit simple, but it really is that simple.
Remember that the BMP-1's doors were fuel tanks.
Yeah, good times that. Ivan, for God's sake, no smoking! If we have a fuel leak in here, we go up like Roman candle.
That thing was probably running off of diesel, so they could probably get away with it. Still ill-advised, but you could get away with it.
But please, you just prove my point there. It's a thing. Because you can sort of directly trace a lineage of the three major BMPs.
And
well, the role doesn't
which
change.
Goddard has also put in there, as also, we have the joy that you have to climb over the engine to get out of it.
Yeah. Well, the role doesn't change, but the weapons fit does, as the recognition.
The requirement to do the role changes. Because when the BMP-1 comes out and is designed, what's your opponent bringing to the fight? They're bringing in Gavins and M103.
Well,
M113s.
Well, there was also an expectation it would have to fight tanks. All the BMPs are expected to be able to at least engage.
That's what your
MBTs.
AT teams are like.
No, all BMPs were expected to be able to have a limited capability to at least engage and destroy enemy peer armor. That's why they carried the ATGMs. That's why they still carry ATGMs to this day.
I'm talking about the BMP-1.
The BMP-1 carried an ATGM as built.
Well, it was more strapped on after initial build.
Yeah, but still, it carried.
Post-initial build.
Yeah, but it carried an ATGM, which was effective against peer armor.
Build.
Very quickly.
The design phase.
In fairness, the 73mm on the BMP, was that not derived from a Soviet anti-tank weapon?
Not sure. But either way.
A low pressure.
It uses the same ammo as one of the Soviet recoilless setups. Can't remember what it's called.
It's related to their attempts at an airborne tank, if I remember correctly.
Well, BMD-1 and BMP
shares an earlier version of the gun.
Well, BMD-1 has exactly the same gun as BMP-1, but again, it's parallel development. The BMD series runs in parallel to the BMP series, 1 through 3.
The BMP gun is directly linked to the SPG-9 recoilless rifle.
Hello, Moe.
Yes, that's SPG-9. Yes, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
It has heat rounds, so it does have anti-tank capability.
Yeah. And then it gets the ATGM when that's no longer enough, and then...
From the blurb on WikiLies, before 1974, ammunition only consisted of heat rounds.
Yeah, because heat is a multi-purpose round.
When you put a frag sleeve on it, yes, but they didn't have...
The initial role for the different weapon system on the BMP-1 is that the low-pressure gun is there to help assist destroying lightweight Western NATO vehicles, such as like N-59s or like the German HS-30. Basically, just potential Western lightweight vehicles that you might come across.
It's part of the fact that the Soviets were increasingly focused on the all-arms combat team aspects of operations.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to be honest, you have to, in many ways, puts the weaponry of the BMP in the context of them expecting to be in a formation which will have tanks and other vehicles in it. And to some extent, this is going to sound terrible, but it's kind of like the British cruisers in the 1920s and 30s were designed to look like the battleships. The size of gun on the BMP means it's far more easy to confuse it with a tank. Far more easy to confuse it with a tank when you're just looking quickly, which might give, while you're concentrating fire at a tank's trying to engage that, it might miss the tank which is engaging it. And the best, for most nations, the usual their anti-tank doctrine has often come down to the best form of killing a method to kill a tank is a better tank. And that was certainly for most of the Cold War. It seemed to be most nations' obsession with what they're investing in. They might talk a game of other things, but that's what they're investing is to try and the best way to kill a tank is a better tank.
Just also note, I posed the original question in the Chieftains Discord, and he replied himself saying a 100mm frag round can have handy infantry support effects.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like I said, it is lob explosive over there and see what happens. And it's bigger explosive that you can lob with the 30mm.
And you also get the ATGM capability with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it means you can bring the ATGM reload cycle inside the vehicle, which is handy from a crew survival role.
And I'm sure a Bradley or a Marder or a Boxer would love getting hit by a 100mm anti-tank round.
Well, the 100mm is primarily there for its HE throwing capability. If you're engaging an IFV, you're going to be using the 30mm. Better time on target. Yeah, better time on target, better flexibility with correction of shots. You are going to use the 30mm. Oh yeah, Leslie. Oh no, Leslie, it could. But it was there for the close range role. It was there for the, oh god, the AEGM can't engage the tank, it's within close range. Hit him with the heat, Johnny! For the BMP-1. Although I could question why a Russian is called Johnny, but hey-ho.
Jonovich.
But the 33mm came before the TGM fleet.
Not... Well, yes, but by the time...
the first production model of BMP has the ATGM already. The Soviet High Command was very insistent on putting that thing on.
Thank you.
Is this Khrushchev era?
Yeah.
Stick rockets on everything. Rocket Man Khrushchev.
Yes, Rocket Man Khrushchev. For Hood, that's not true. The 76mm BMP-1 cannon had an anemic HE shell. It's a common misconception, but the 76mm HE on the BMP-1 was anemic in a fire support role. The MG was actually seen as better than the 76mm HE was.
That's...
No, seriously, that's how bad the HE frag shell on the 76mm 73mm BMP-1's gun was.
It's basically a breech-loading RPG.
Yeah.
Yeah, and infantry really don't like it when people fire RPGs at them.
Yes, but...
It's not effective, but it's scary, but it's not really effective.
Yeah, they'd still use it.
At suppressing people.
I would argue scaring someone enough is effective.
Yeah, like I'm not arguing. Oh yeah, like I'm not arguing they wouldn't use it, but I'm just saying, like I said, I'm just going off what the Russians themselves said. They preferred the machine gun infantry support role with the BMP-1 than they did the 73. There's a reason why a lot of the later marks of BMP-1 actually replaced the 73 with the same 30mm that the BMP-2 got. Some of the very latest marks of BMP-1 they built.
Again, this is anecdotal, but a part of the reason I know from my friend's dad also really don't like the BMP-1 because the 73 had a habit of exploding.
There was also that. Also that little problem.
Especially if you use some of the ammunition, it wouldn't burn completely. So if you put the new shell in, there was a good chance it blew up before you shut the breech.
You see, Ivan, if we use shell can't. Okay, I feel like we've gone over this question. Yeah.
Now, I don't think there is a production model of BMP-1
Okay,
that
let's
has the
Yeah.
30 mil.
Yeah.
Can I just quickly point out that the 30 mil autocannon that they got for the BMP2, how much use the Soviets and the Russians managed to get out of that thing? They've snapped it on pretty much anything that can carry it.
Oh yeah, BMD2 got it.
K-50 had it, the Mi-28 had it,
Yeah. BMD3.
BTR-80s.
Yeah. BTR-90.
30 mil is 30 mil.
Yes. Daka. So, on YouTube Minecraft Watcher asks, which would you rather have, a Flamberger, a Katana, or a Zweihander? I am not skilled enough in hand-to-hand combat to...
Zweihander.
Zweihander.
I'm going to go with the rest of the panel and say Zweihander because I do not have the experience to make a comment otherwise.
Zweihander fleet. Think of what that sounds like.
I know, two-handed. I speak a smidge of German.
Mm-hmm.
It's very simple. Whichever stick is the longest is the one you want.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of the fact that Zweihander is a longer reached weapon. It also has, they tended to be, because they're primarily used by Landsknechts, they tended to be much higher quality weapons on average.
Mm-hmm.
And
Good guards on it as well. If the first set of guards doesn't get the blade, the other one will.
very good guards. They were very much sort of, this is a tool you use to kill heavy infantry. Which also meant that Landsknechts got quite a reputation of just going through people with them. Not cutting people. Not stabbing people.
Going through them. I get
Going
the gist.
Through.
Yes, I get the gist.
Because I remember, because a friend of mine who, one of the HEMA guys, Dax, brother goes to, he's got a copy of a 15th century German training manual for one. And there's a diagram of the human torso that dictates where the major ribs and spinal bones are, so that you don't twist and break your wrist when you're attempting to cut through someone.
Well, that's definitely something.
So you can slide in between the vertebrae instead of hitting them straight on, because the sword would sort of deflect down into the gap from the vertebrae.
Well, that's...
And if you weren't ready for it, it could break your wrist.
Well,
So
that's
technically
something.
Speaking, as Hood and Richelieu were saying, technically speaking, Flambergers are a form of Zweihander. They just have a weird blade. Personally, though, I don't like that blade effect.
Well, fair
It's
enough.
just not something I enjoy.
Yeah, fair enough. Right, so, next question
It's very
is
much the specialist Zweihander that's for an anti-cavalry thing.
I just don't know why you would necessarily take a katana on average.
Yeah.
In most
Wasn't it
scenarios, a katana's
Dachi?
just not useful to me.
Yeah, katanas are
Not to say
useful.
katanas are
The
bad
only,
swords,
the
but
only
katanas do
comparable
have
thing
uses,
you
but-
have is in Odachi.
Yeah. Like, the katana is useful in... Well,
select
or...
circumstances.
Yeah.
But I'd
it's...
still just give me a good old-fashioned
the
hand and a
problem
half
with
sword,
katana is
honestly.
that katana is the name of the category of weapons. There isn't actually like a proper sword that you could label a katana to.
It's sort of like, as I understand it, it's sort of like saying bastard sword or long
Yes,
sword.
in essence.
There's so much nuance to that word.
Yep.
Because a 9th century Great Heathen Army era longsword from Scandinavia, it's very different from a 15th century Venetian longsword that's made with this fancy thing called steel.
Right,
Anyway.
so... Typically running off... hang on. No, sorry. Brandon Larson asks, have the panel seen the 1969 film Battle of Britain? And if so, what are your thoughts on it? Love it! Love it! It's beautiful. It's fantastic. It's just, yes.
Hang on, who's
We will have real air combat scenes with dozens of aircraft flying around, all the practical effects, like, beautiful. And also the cast. You got Christopher Plummer, Michael Caine, whoever the flip played Hermann Goering, I forget.
Look,
They got so many planes that they were technically the 35th largest air force in the world.
Yep.
Oh, and
I
Alec
would
Guinness,
say
yes.
It's what I say about a lot of the Warhammer animations. It's awfully homoerotic, and it's why I absolutely adore it.
Yep.
Because there's a sense of flamboyance.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like some of the shots where you got the slow motion Air Force pilots that you're like, this shot was for the ladies. And I'm not complaining.
It's the 1969 version of Top Gun.
Kind of.
Yes, and I would say the exact same thing about Top Gun.
Oh, dear.
And it's like, the men like the jet aircraft, we like something else.
Let's be honest. Was there any need to have the beach volleyball scene in Top Gun?
Probably not, but, well, it was there anyway.
Not great.
Fan
Because you've gotta
service.
entertain the wives of the
Yep.
men somehow.
Yep, also, fan service is a proven part of filmmaking. Next question is from YouTube Minecraft Watcher. If an armed merchantman Hilfskreuzer from World War II was to be sent to 1770 with unlimited fuel, ammunition, food, and fresh water, how powerful would it be, and what uses would it have? You've created an empire creation machine. It is fundamentally unstoppable. It is fundamentally unkillable. It has no weaknesses. Because it has unlimited everything it needs to keep going. The only thing that could possibly slow it down would be its hull eventually fouling up. That is a weapon with which to make or unmake any nation on the planet.
Hey, weapons apart from Metal Gear.
I mean...
It's 1770, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sent back with infinite fuel.
Ammunition, food, and fresh water.
The trouble is it's 1770. Yes, you do have the power to dominate the seas, and that's useful, but you're only one ship, so you can only be in one place at a time. And fundamentally, if you want to make a nation and remake a nation, any nation which is in a very small island, you need to land your crew and actually do some land fighting. And that leads to problems, because any losses you sustain, you can't replace.
Mm-hmm. You'd basically have to use yourself as an extremely powerful mercenary force that you could then have members of your crew integrate their way into various tranches of whatever government you want to overtake by making yourself indispensable, and then at an appointed moment seize the levers of state power. Ideally, you'd want a nation whose capital is on the coast to do that.
Nations in 1770.
I know they're not the same
big
as
ones, the ones you want. That's not really. Oh, we're going to infiltrate the nation. The positions of power. How?
One thing you could do is seize a major colonial government. So you could seize a nation like Brazil or New Spain or Peru.
It's not big centralized factories.
No, I know.
No, I was talking. There's a response about seizing the means of production. I was responding to that.
No, that's just seize the means of production. What production? Japan could work.
Yeah.
You could seize. You could probably seize Hokkaido. The mainland's not going to work, but Hokkaido you could probably seize. Use that as a base.
Yeah, but you've still got quite a large population there. And you've got the fact that you ain't going to be sleeping safe.
It's true. Unless you sleep on the boat. But no, even then, people could row out to the boat. Yeah. It's definitely a fleet-destroying weapon.
So the trouble is, you're only one ship. Yes, you can destroy fleets,
Yeah,
but
but
you're only one ship.
yeah. Could
Did you
the
mention
could the German
mechanical endurance?
could the German that the crew speak be understood by German speakers of the time?
Well, that's a whole other fun. That's going to be a whole other fun thing.
Because I mean, in theory, they
Because remember,
Which
there isn't a
German?
it's also the fact is Germany at this point is nowhere near unified.
it's also not even.
We are
Yeah,
many years from that.
there's no
They could communicate they could although the Prussians at this point are speaking very high Prussian,
Yeah,
which is very interesting. The modern German would sound very coarse to them.
there is actually a wild card option I just thought of.
Yeah.
1770. No, not at all. Now, this is going to sound a bit weird, but as I'm sure some of you know, now obviously this hasn't happened yet in 1770, but these Germans will know that prior to World War One, hopefully, well, if one of them might have a history book or something, the United States of America got a very large German emigre population. Now, while that is far in the future, if, let's say, a Hilfskreuzer rocks up during the American Independence War, which is quite literally 6 years away from starting when it comes back, in theory, if they help out in the resolution of that particular conflict in favour of the United States without the French getting involved, not only will that win an awful lot of goodwill, the crew could also use... And some of them might speak English, so they might be able to actually liaise with the colonists, even though because it's close enough to modern English that they should be able to converse in it without too much difficulty. There might be a few phrases here and there that wouldn't work.
Good luck. You're talking. It's the American English in this period. We're talking is closer to Elizabethan English than modern English.
Yeah, I know, but
it's one of those cases of it would be recognizable to a native English speaker. Because English is still having its love-hate relationship with gendered language.
Yeah.
Where part of the language
And
is
grammar.
gendered, part of it isn't.
Yeah.
I'm also obligated to point out
And
that
grammar.
As dangerous
Oh,
as you
don't
may,
tell me about that.
I'm also obligated to point out that as dangerous as you may think certain members of the Japanese samurai clans might be, can you just imagine the likes of the late 18th century royal captains and admirals at the sum of prize money capture of such a vessel?
Yeah.
In a nice way,
What rank of
Nelson is
nobility
very
do
much
you get?
alive, and at this point Nelson at this point is not a captain in the Mediterranean, in the Caribbean yet. But yeah, he's not far off it.
That's not just prize money. That's prize money with a title.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, unless the Germans are willing to touch off their own magazine.
Yeah.
Is this
There-
World War One or two, by the way?
One, I think.
So
hell's
the polio vaccine's not a thing.
Well, no. If
Not
it's a
reliable.
Hilfskreuzer, that's a World War II designation.
I still think the funniest thing they could do is run around and pretend they're Davy Jones.
That would be funny. Heck, maybe that's where the myth comes from. But anyway, I think we've hit that
It would
question
just be
over the
funny.
head.
People given these immortal, all-powerful ship dies of a disease
Yeah, and just
because they
die.
went to a tropical port.
Yes. Well, any port generally, disease is just rife in this period.
Yeah, but if you're around the Americas, the Caribbean,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially Hispaniola and Cuba,
Oh no, fuck so, don't go there.
God, the STDs they're gonna suffer from.
Yeah, don't go there.
Although, honestly, I'd be more concerned about them being the...
That ship, you never said that ship had an infinite supply of mercury.
No.
They have
So-
100 years of extra virulence in there, so...
I would say, too, though, with this ship going up, vaguely 130 odd years into the past,
Yep.
140 odd years into the past, I would be more concerned about the ship becoming a walking virus bomb against the past rather than the other way around.
Yeah, it's possible.
I wouldn't be though, strangely.
So
Because
I feel like
it's coming from a lot cleaner time.
Yeah.
Yes, but
And
by-
it's the fact that a lot of the reason why sort of the earlier plagues were so devastating was because of the lack of urbanization in the Americas. These are urbanized Americas now. It's the urbanized tropics. It's the worst possible place for disease outside of maybe Indonesia? Maybe, if you're Dutch.
1860s HMS Warrior would be great.
So, moving on. Your typical officer asks, how would the Alaska-class cruisers fare against Japanese cruisers during the Guadalcanal service engagements? They are fundamentally an existential level threat to the Japanese cruisers. Unless it's the Congo showing up, the Alaskas, quite frankly, just laugh hysterically while obliterating in incredibly precise, concise, and concise fashion the Japanese cruisers.
I am going to point out, though, that at the ranges that you often see in the Guadalcanal campaign, 5-inch starts becoming effective against battleship tertiary armor. Guadalcanal is just not a fight you want to be in if you have anything warranting bigger than a 6-inch guns pointed at you.
The problem is that they don't really. The problem is with Guadalcanal is that neither side can really cherry pick what they're throwing in as their assets to be the core around which they're building their task groups.
Oh yeah, fair enough. I'm just saying that.
And also, having more armor makes you more survivable in that environment. I'm not saying that they are invulnerable or anything. I'm just saying that they have more armor, so their chances of surviving go up.
Maybe.
However, there are also bigger ships.
There is that, yeah.
And
being targeted versus.
And there are still the American captains in charge who do not understand the desires of zigzag, which is at this point becoming, I don't know how we can describe it with the Royal Navy at this point. The Royal Navy officers are zigzagging in their sleep.
As someone who does work with Royal Navy officers,
Seriously, Royal Navy navigation officers in this period probably zigzag so much that their wives complain.
as the member of the panel who works with Royal Navy personnel the most, are Royal Navy officers able to walk in a straight line nowadays?
Most of the time they seem to. They seem to. Yeah, mostly.
It depends. Haven't been let near alcohol.
I said, World War II, they zigzagged so much. They zigzagged so much. I'm fairly sure that they got so inbuilt that their wives complained.
Good times.
We've got stabilizers now, so it's not as pronounced.
Yes. How is the Alaska's torpedo defense system?
It's not enough to prevent long lances doing nasty things.
A long lance is still going to tear a hole.
Yeah, the long lance is going to do nasty things. It depends on what ships they're replacing. If they're added to existing formations, then that's going to radically change how the battles go, because you can't then replicate torpedo tracks and what's going to hit what. Because they'll be in a different place in a formation compared to what the formation was historically. If they're replacing ships at historical engagements, it'll be fairly easy to pan out what they would do and possible damage they might take or inflict. You get what I'm saying with that, don't you, Dr. Clark?
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's one for one, but it would make it easier if we knew, like, are they replacing ships in certain actions? Are they just available for the campaign? Like, what are they doing? Like, what's the exact bread and butter of the scenario here? But, moving on. Next question. YouTube Minecraft Watcher asks, if you were to modernize Marine Nationale Hoche, what changes would you make to it? That entirely depends on when.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you what level of modernization I'm going to do to Hoche. You remember, I'm going to bring back the concept of the Great Refit.
That's cheating. That's cheating. So
It's either
If we
that
tear
or the
it down to,
scrapyard.
if we tear it down to the keel,
so here's the thing. If it's also going to depend on how much freedom I've got. If I've got to retain her as a frontline combatant past 1900, that's not possible. She has been thoroughly outclassed, and no amount of rebuilding work that's realistic or practical is going to allow her to retain her role as a frontline member of France's battle line. It's just not a viable situation. And prior to that, she doesn't need a rebuild to retain that capability. If I am given complete freedom, however, to do a rebuild, what I will probably do is I'll take her down to her top of a tumble home. I will do a complete engine rebuild and reboilering. Probably aim to keep the same speed, 16.5 knots. So I'm going to try and aim to bring her waterline up a bit. Sorry, down a bit. And try and get her a little bit more freeboard. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit her with the most efficient machinery I can. We're going to build a low forward... We're basically going to have a very almost bare bones superstructure if we can. Possibly with an amidships superstructure where the funnels are and also some of the crew accommodation. I'm going to fit probably a pair of those very, very nice French... Hang on, I just need to think about this. What's it called? Oh, come on, Fleet. Give me a second. Sorry, give Fleet a second. I just need to think. Oh, very... I can't be mad. I can't be mad. I walked into that one.
Do the same that they did with Vagan.
Oh, that's it. I've got it. I've got it. I'm gonna fit.
Hurt yourself.
I'm gonna fit.
Very strenuous.
I'm gonna fit a pair of those nice French 7.6-inch guns. One forward.
The 274s.
No, God no. No. No, God no. God no. No. I am. You are.
So the 193s.
Yep. Yep. I'm fitting one forward and one aft. I'm fitting a secondary battery of 6 5.4-inch guns. And basically what I'm rebuilding her into is a garrison ship for French Indochina. So raise a freeboard, fit her with a armament similar to France's equivalent armoured cruisers of the period, and then send her out to do that.
But why not two 274s?
Stability. And to basically keep the cost of the rebuild down.
Was she gonna stop?
I'm pretty sure she can fit two 274s, to be honest.
No, she probably could.
Much problem.
No, she probably could, but I am hedging my bets. I'm also aiming to have her be a specific role.
Yeah. Kind of similar to the rebuilds of that weird class of ironclads that we had with 420s.
Yeah, the rebuilds of the Terribles.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, the rebuilds of them.
I love those.
That's basically what I'm going for here. But unfortunately,
they were able to sail because they had a very low draft. They were able to sail above the Turkish mines at the Dardanelles.
Yeah, they had some fun there, didn't they?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how I would.
274.
Yeah, that's how I would modernise Hoche.
I've got to give the French credit though. Sometimes, occasionally, they name their ships.
Yes.
Very poignantly for the ships themselves.
Yes,
like
sure.
I don't know who would call their own ship terrible, but
yeah,
it
That's
takes
a different
some
meaning.
humility, you know.
Typical gunnery
It's
officer.
like the terrible.
Yeah, typical gunnery officer asks. Question 9. Do you think? Yeah, this is on Discord. Do you think the UK is the first to envisage the carrier strike group or the carrier battle group for its navy way before the USN came up with their own, like combined operations of carriers with escorting vessels and replenishment ships? Also, do you think the UK operates their CVBG or CSG more effectively and efficiently than the USN throughout history, from HMS Argus through to the introduction of the supercarriers during the Cold War? Well, that is a very long question, but fundamentally,
Okay.
Yeah.
the
Fleet, I'm going to let you go first, and I'm going to talk along on this one.
the UK and the US go through somewhat similar learning processes as they exercise their fleets in the interwar period, although they come to slightly different outcomes in how they think carriers should be used, carrier survivability, and fleet structure. So the US has this whole thing they find out when they think, okay, if a carrier's found, it's a dead carrier, so we don't operate our carriers together, we keep them separate from each other, because we don't want to lose more than one carrier if they get found, because if they're found, they're dead. And the Royal Navy has an option where they can operate their carriers independently, they can operate them in a group, they can operate them with battleships, without battleships, depending on what they need the carrier to do. But these aren't what we would consider to be the carrier strike or carrier battle groups yet. They're not the genesis of that idea. You don't really see that idea coalesce until post-war. When you see the carrier really elevated to the sole...
Wait, what do you think a carrier battle group is?
It's a task force centered on a carrier.
It's a task force. It's a battle group. Does it matter if it has a carrier at the center or not in terms of its context of forming forces up into task groups?
Well, yes, because if it's a carrier battle group, it would need a carrier at its center, wouldn't it?
Yes, but if how do I put this? Do I fundamentally change the way my task group is laid out and organized if it's got a carrier at the center or a battleship at the center in the 1920s and 30s?
Yes.
Do I?
Well, no, not really.
Oh, you would, because you would change
So actually, what you're talking
escort
about...
composition, and you would change how they acted, wouldn't you?
No, not in the 20s and 30s.
No,
Hey,
not in the 20s and 30s, Foxo.
They come up with the idea that you can have a carrier in its own battle group, or with its own group of warships, but it doesn't change the way they fundamentally think about that group operating. It's just a group with a capital ship.
It's a battle group concept of operations. The fact we call them the carrier battle groups these days is more because we're emphasizing the carrier as the center group, but prior to that it was just called battle group operations.
Yeah.
That was a concept operation which came out fundamentally of the British thinking about what the next war was going to be like during World War One.
Mm-hmm.
And the USN sort of shared a similar idea, but the USN couldn't get their government around to it, so they kept with the scout fleet and the battle fleet concept, because their government could understand that and would fund that.
Yeah. Like, you see both navies sort of thinking... Like, both navies are thinking the same way, but as Dr. Clark says, you've got the US basically can't adopt it because the Congress won't fund it.
Congress not funding something? Impossible.
Basically, Mahan had done a good enough job of explaining to the Congress they needed to have a navy, but they got wedded to the idea of a battle fleet concept of that navy as a huge sledgehammer.
Yeah.
And it took a whole nother war for the US government to start thinking broader than a navy, that actually what you're using is the whole force effect of different groups acting.
Yep.
But the US Navy's thinking about it.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas the Royal Navy, arguably, that's what they're building for.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the reasons why at the end of World War One they are focusing on building battle cruiser classes.
Yep.
Because they are thinking about the battle groups going around the world and rapidly deploying battle groups.
Yeah, if there's a trouble spot, rock up with a G3, 2 to 4 cruisers, 2 flotillas of destroyers, boom. There's your rapid reaction battle group.
Mate, what are you doing?
Giving you a hard
how
time.
how big is a flotilla of destroyers at the end of World War One?
6 destroyers, isn't it?
21.
Oh.
Yeah. Destroyer flotillas are large. It's, flotilla leaders. Like, you get one for the entire class. Yeah.
By World War II, they've shrunk down to 9 ships in a flotilla.
Well, okay, fair enough.
You're effectively sending an entire letter class of ships if you're sending a flotilla.
You were sending 42. So you said saying a couple of flotillas. You're sending 42 destroyers.
Well, I was operating under a misunderstanding of size.
It'll certainly send a message.
Well, they'll not be lacking screen.
Also, you're sending a massive fleet.
Yeah, well,
you definitely got enough of a screen there.
Half a flotilla then in that period, if we're talking about the G3s.
Just a pair of squadrons then.
They didn't have squadrons for the destroyers at that point. The US then go into flotilla squadron form. The British shrink the flotilla down to roughly 9 ships.
Okay.
Mainly, the reason the British shrink it down isn't because they're thinking in small numbers. It's because they want to increase numbers of captain destroyers to increase the number of senior positions for destroyer commanders, so they can rapidly expand it if they need to in a future war.
Turns out they were right to do that.
Yeah.
Wait, does the rapidly increasing size of destroyers have an effect as well, though? Because it'd be much harder to keep 21, say, tribal equivalents than the small flush deckers are operating.
Honestly, and I've done a lot of discussions about this, if you're looking at the British destroyers, they stay at roughly the 1,200, 1,000, 1,500 tons for quite a long time. They do stabilize into that. Yes, they're not the same size ships you would the 600, 900 ton ones, but yeah, you could. The British could still do it as long as the V&Ws class, the V's and W class destroyers around. But it's also to extent tactical doctrine and how you start to employ these ships. Because if you think about it, the point of when you had the 21 ships and you had the really large flotillas is because they were mass torpedo formations which were going to launch a massive amount of torpedoes at their opponent. Or they were providing one flotilla was providing the entire patrol force for an area.
Yeah.
The moment you start thinking in terms of tactical dexterity, and you start thinking how you're going to use these units, and they're more than just a mass torpedo force, they are other duties, that's when you start to shrink down, because you start thinking, well, hang on, if I need to do a convoy escort, how many destroyers do I need for a convoy escort? I don't need 21, but I do want a captain to be in charge of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that it's as you start analysing the war, really these things start to change.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it takes time. And when Fleet was talking about it would not a couple of flotillas of destroyers would be a lot of destroyers.
Yeah, no, okay, fair. Like I didn't know. Sorry, I was operating on World War II size. That was wrong. Sorry about that.
You were operating on post World War II size destroyer flotillas.
Fair enough. Okay,
yeah,
so
I'm sorry, Fleet just letting the bloody East London preschoolers out here in naval combat.
But
back here, we'll shank you.
Yeah.
Well.
But yeah, so the battle group as a concept, whether led by a carrier or, well, just a group. I mean, look, surface action groups could arguably fall under a similar sort of concept. It's a battle group.
They are.
Yeah, it's a battle group. I think it's something that...
what you have to remember is carrier battle groups, amphibious task groups, and surface action groups, they're all just forms of battle groups.
Yeah.
So what? So you could argue that the Royal Navy or the Portuguese were the ones that pioneered it then, with the whole dawn of the capital ship, where you would want smaller ships with your ships of the line instead of just having the ships of the line by themselves.
I think once you really start to get into the modern concept of battle groups in the form of thing, once you've got radios developed, and once you have radios, which is why. And you can communicate between multi-battle groups and you can bring them together. What people often forget is that the battle of the sinking of the Bismarck, that's bringing together multiple battle groups. Rodney was off on her own doing other things, and she's come up with her own destroyers. She forms up with King George V, which was coming up with her own destroyers. And more destroyers come in, and there are cruisers, and they're all separate battle groups being brought together for the fight. And that's the reality. Once you start talking about battle group operations, you're talking about a scenario where you can afford to have a distributed fleet because you can bring it together. And that's only really something that comes once you've got reliable radio communications.
This almost reminds me of how the Portuguese operated in the Indian Ocean. but
yes, there is similarities, but the thing is about the Portuguese is those commands are very much independent commands and not cooperating until they actually find each other.
Yeah.
Whereas battle group as a concept is that I can have this battle group off doing that mission, that battle group off doing that mission, and I can combine them if I need to for another mission with just communications, with the speed of communications, and make it work rapidly.
Yeah.
It's basically the Portuguese are doing more what we call a distributed fleet model rather than a battle group model.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds like splitting hairs, but it basically, one is based around distributed command, and the other one is based around singular centralized command, but with distributed formations operating under a single command.
So could you argue that one is a precursor to the other?
Yes.
Okay.
It's fundamentally the battle group formation is you've taken this idea, but you've now with radio communications you can do different things.
Yeah. So, on YouTube Minecraft Watcher asks, if you were to modernize the IJN Nagato, what changes would you make to it? The only change I would make fundamentally from the very thorough and effective modernization the Japanese themselves carried out on Nagato in the 30s would be to completely remove the secondary casemate battery and use the weight for 2 more twin 5-inch mounts per side. 2 more twin dual-purpose 5-inch mounts per side. That's the only real change I'd fundamentally make. Because she still gets 25 knots of speed, which is down by a knot and a half from where she started, but it's still quick enough. Her range massively goes up. She gets some of the beginnings of her 25mm farm, but that can be added to much later. It doesn't require a full rebuild. But one thing it does do is it gives her more heavy AA firepower and a fundamentally more workable secondary battery in all sea states, which her casemate battery was not. But that's the only thing I'd really change. She's not a bad ship in her original form or as rebuilt. It's a pity she never really got a chance to show what she could do. Even at Battle of Samar, she didn't really get a good chance to make a go of it, which is a pity. Probably my favourite Japanese battleship, the Nagatos.
Of built battleships, I would agree with you.
Okay, so that was fairly. It's fairly simple, that question, because there's not really much to change. Typical gun.
Unless you actually do a proper full rebuild, but yeah.
Well, thing is, the mid-30 rebuild was a full rebuild. Reboilering, new fire control.
No, I mean even more extensive than that.
How do you get more expensive than that? How do you?
I think he wants to do a full Congo level rebuild.
That was a full Congo level rebuild. All the Japanese capital ships got it.
No one.
No, it wasn't.
They didn't
not
completely redo the
extensive.
framing, did they?
Well, no, but in terms of
It's like a part of the argument between Clark and Drake, if I remember correctly, with the Congos is don't they get a lot of their framing and their bulkheads redone to be much thicker, which is where the question between battle cruiser and fast battleship comes in. And Nagato wasn't refitted to
I put my thumbs up. You got it right. I don't need to add anything. As I expect, my best student on the panel. What can be said?
yeah. Typical officer asks on Discord. Do you think the Object 685, if it entered production during the Cold War, would be miles better than the eventual Sprut SD as an airborne light tank and a true or actual replacement for the PT-76? No. The Sprut SD, well, first of all, it's more of an airborne fire support platform than a light tank in the traditional sense. But B, it's a modern vehicle, so I'll not say any more than that. The Object 685 was fundamentally a vehicle created for a role that didn't exist at the time.
Which one's the 685?
It's a vehicle I found very little information of. It has like a single article on a single obscure wiki. It's basically a replacement for the PT-76 as an amphibious and airborne light tank.
It's something Gaijin digged up from somewhere.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I look at it and go, why do you need this? You have the BMD-2 for airborne fire support for your troops. And if you want to send a gun larger than 30mm into battle, the ASU-85 exists, and it's cheaper to maintain, easier, and better at a fire support role than this thing would be.
No, it's amphibious.
Well, yeah, but if you want an amphibious tank, the PT-76 exists with a decent HE filler shell.
The PT-76 was
the point of the 685 is to replace the PT-76.
PT-76 doesn't need replacement. It didn't need replacement at the time.
It did. It did.
It's an amphibious light tank. All it needs.
Yeah, and it was really showing its age.
All it needs is a machine gun, a gun, at the period we're talking about, and that's about it. And the ability to swim.
Stuff like severe flooding and sealing issues.
Well, yeah, there is that.
That are
could do with fixing.
The hull.
Well, there is that could probably do with fixing. But at that point, just build a better hull and stick a turret with a 76mm gun on it.
Looks of it, that's essentially what they were trying to do.
Why does it need a 100mm gun? Why does it need a 100mm gun? What is the point?
It's standardizing, I think.
Why does the BMP need a 100mm gun?
Well,
yeah, the BMP's using it. It can use the older 120mm ammo.
Ooh.
So,
6.5 using the long T5 pilots. They're still using T-55s.
Yeah.
When was this designed? 69. I suppose that makes sense. Still, it's not better than the Sprut. The Sprut is a fantastic fire support platform, especially as an airborne light tank.
Horses for courses against the Sprut. It's horses for courses because they do two very different jobs.
Yeah.
It depends which Sprut you mean as well, because the Sprut also means the towed and self-emplacing anti-tank guns.
Yeah. There is also, the towed, yeah. So, on YouTube, YouTube Minecraft Watcher, good lord, he's really turning into, he's really cranking out the questions. Do you think it's possible for the 150mm naval gun to be made dual purpose, similar to the modern 5-inch 60 caliber? Yes, the US did it in the immediate aftermath of World War II, and so did the British, with the Worcestershire and Tiger classes, respectively. And would the Allies
the Worcester? They're not Worcestershire.
And the Allies / NATO use it. It's heavier than the 5-inch per shell. No. There's a reason why, and I've said this before in terms of modern naval gunnery, there is a reason why the Chinese, the Russians, the British, the French, the Japanese, everyone has concentrated and coalesced around a caliber range from 110 to 130mm. It is the lovely, lovely sweet spot between range, lethality, ease of use for auto-loading, firepower, and flexibility.
Quick thing, can we get a petition to remove Fleet's British license? Because
okay. Can we have okay, Fleet. How do I?
How we get
I don't want to do this in a way. I don't want to do this in a way which crushes his soul. Okay,
Like the host, the soul was already crushed.
All right. So, Fleet, you have to add into the context of this discussion the end of the Cold War and the end of history and all those thinkings that come from that period.
I mean,
the reason I say you have to add that into Fleet,
I'll let
you say your piece.
Go on.
The reason you have to add that in is that a lot of the weapons we have now got were considered good enough and therefore you didn't need to do much investment. And you have to remember that a lot of the gun, there was a period where there was no investment going into main guns because the idea was you weren't going to have any main guns. And this was during the Cold War. You're going to be an all-missile navy. So one of the problems you have realistically in modern guns, especially on ships, is that in many ways, whilst they are good general-purpose assets, we all know we could make a 6-inch or even maybe a 9.2-inch, depending on your perspective, that would fill all that role with just the same rate of fire, etc., but we give you better range, more power, and make more sense for something the size of the ship you're dealing with. Because when you're talking about something which is approaching 10,000 tons, or getting bigger than that, and its deck gun is a single 5-inch. No matter how the rate of fire and how good that 5-inch gun, it is kind of puny in terms of its capabilities versus what you could carry with the weight you are having. And the fact is, a 6-inch gun would not take up that much more space.
I mean, the 5-inch gun is all you need. You don't need anything more than that. It's perfectly fine. There's no reason to go bigger.
There's no technical reason to go bigger, Fleet, but there is an emotional and psychological and egotistical.
There is actually a technical reason to go bigger. There is a technical reason to go bigger as well. Okay, so Fleet.
The range?
Range is the first thing, but also there is Fleet range. There is also, and the other bigger thing with a 6-inch gun is A, it's space in the shell for you to put things in there. B, it's the size and scale of explosives, but also, and this is the point, realistically, the square cube law comes into effect in very interesting ways once you go from 5-inch to 6-inch. And the amount you can do with a shell and the options for it. This is why whenever people start looking at next generation weapons and guns and future gun systems, they ultimately seem to cut, especially for ships, since they've decided they need to come into it, they seem to keep coming up with ideas which are bigger than 5-inch.
I mean,
because of the space in the shell. Because of what you want to program for.
There is that.
The thing is,
well,
you're thinking about this from perspective of, do we need it to penetrate armored ships?
No. God, no. That's not why I'm thinking about it at all.
Do we need it to deal with increasingly... do we want to have capability to suppress land-based systems? And again, range helps. But also firepower and being able to send less shells, because the more shells you fire at a target, the more you give your own position away. So the further away you can be, and the fewer shells you can use to engage and destroy a target, the better. Now, you might go, well, why not use missiles? Well, missiles are increasingly expensive. They always have been, but they are increasingly expensive. And the big expense with them is not just the financial cost, it's the logistics cost of replacing them. And there are things you want to engage with missiles, and the things you need to engage with missiles, and the things you don't. And this is the point we're getting to. Again, it's a logistics question.
Oh, yeah.
I often have discussion when people go, well, you can just use a missile. I go, yes, but then that's a missile you can't use for something else. Well, then we just replace it. Well, then you have to replace you have to reload the ship's VLS with that missile. It's actually easier at sea to reload guns.
Oh, completely.
It's easier to reload shells and magazines.
Oh, yeah.
So this is why making the gun more lethal, the main gun more lethal, longer range, able to take out targets with fewer hits, so it doesn't give your position away as much, is an advantageous thing to do. Is a sensible thing to do. Which is basically the argument for the bigger guns. It's the 5-inch is lovely.
I mean, I get that.
But in a world where you've got increasingly sophisticated and increasingly cheap to employ assets which can increase your horizon of view, not give you blanket view out in the world, but increase the horizon of your view from short positions.
Yeah.
Suddenly it becomes, is it enough?
Yeah. I think 6-inch you could probably see come in. Because, again, like, I had forgotten the discussion we had yesterday, and how the gulf between 5 and 6 inches is actually, for some reason, bigger than in terms of what changes in capability than a lot of people think. It's kind of freaky. So 6-inch I could see. I don't think you'd see beyond 6-inch unless the threat environment changes. You might see a proliferation of secondary batteries re-emerge, people following the Italian mindset, so you might have a 6-inch forward and a bunch of 3-inch come back, so you might have a 3-inch aft or a pair of 3-inch on the wings. But I don't think you'll see more...
Which is pretty much what the British are already sort of heading towards with the Type 31s, who were carefully not omitting it with 57mm and 240s.
Yeah, that's...
You're starting to head towards more and more gun-dense armament.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's like you said, it gives you flexibility of option, it gives you target servicing opportunities that don't require missile release, which you can then reload at sea. It brings cost per engagement envelope down, depending on what you're engaging, which can be quite useful, especially if you're engaging things like cheap one-way attack drones that you probably don't want to use a missile to engage, because cost per shot really doesn't favour the missile at that point.
It's more logistics cost per shot.
Yeah, there is that as well.
It's the logistics cost. It's not the financial cost. It's logistics cost. Because as I try and explain sometimes when we're talking about the missiles being used to engage targets in the Red Sea, again, it's not about the cost of the missile versus the cost of the thing it's intercepting. It's the cost of the thing. It's the cost of the damage that thing it's intercepting would do. That's what your offset cost is. But it's still logistics cost.
Oh yeah.
Every time you use one of those big systems, you've used it, and you can do that in the kind of Red Sea engagement. Because let's be honest, the Houthis' logistics train is even worse.
Yeah, but if you're talking a full-on shooting war, you really don't want to use those missiles unless you are dealing with a, oh dear lord, the sky is full of anti-ship missiles.
Look, when I start seeing ships going out with roughly 4 laser positions on them, 3 76mm and 3 phalanx, mounted sort of around the ships on a sort of standard destroyer, as well as missiles, and a primary gun of about a 6-inch, then I'll know that we're sort of starting to really prepare for a potential conflict.
Yeah.
Until then, we are still playing the we can tech this game out.
Mm-hmm. Right, so hey, we had a good dive on that question. That was a pretty good dive, yeah.
It's to give war a chance, goddammit.
Typical gunnery officer asks, opinions on the Type 74 tank in terms of its role of an MBT as a Cold War. Do you think the Type 74 could wipe the floor against Leopard 1 and T-55? Well, first of all, Type 74 is basically the Japanese looking at the Leopard as a concept for how you build an MBT and going, we want to do that. Because it trades...
We want it to be also able to get over our bridges.
Yes. Like, it's a vehicle that prioritizes mobility and firepower over ability to resist tank rounds coming back the other way. You survive by not getting hit.
You survive by putting
being an ambush predator that actually use your own infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's not with that. It's you survive by being a tank in a place where the enemy can't get tanks.
Yeah. Leopard 1 is basically a peer opponent. In fact, Leopard 1 is basically... It is a peer opponent. It's the same concept executed by the Germans. Ambush predator, use your own logistics. Same gun. Pretty much similar concept. Ambush predator, as Dr. Clark said. T-55... All things being equal, a Type 74 should win against the T-75 if the crews are equally trained. But the T-55 absolutely can kill the Type 74 if it catches it out of position. Like, make no mistake, the T-55 absolutely can kill a Type 74 if it catches it running between positions.
I think the only issue would be that these are entering service in the 60s.
No.
Entering service in the 70s.
75.
If it's in the 70s, it's worse because you're looking at the modernizations of the T-55s, aren't you?
Yeah.
Well, no. At worst, you may be facing T-72s.
Well, the question was specifically T-55.
At this point, they're also doing stuff like the T-62 and T-55 modernizations.
And some of their gun-launched ATGMs are nasty.
Where they get stuff like the composite armors.
Yeah.
And the ERA.
I mean, it's not going to save them from a dart from an L7, but
that's more than enough firepower.
Yeah, it's like I say, all things being equal, the Type 74 should. The Type 74 can win, but it's 70-30 in favor of the Type 74, which is closer odds than the Japanese would probably like.
I would flip that fleet if it's the contemporary T-54s.
No, it's not.
Fundamentally, the entire thing about Type 74 is that it's designed to operate in the mountainous region of Japan.
I mean,
that's
if
why
we specify if we specify in the mountainous regions,
literally, it doesn't.
Flat comparison.
T-55
argument easy.
Yeah, but I'd also Foxo. I'm gonna have to disagree with you there. Like I say, you also have to bear in mind how the tanks are going to be used, how the crews are trained, because you can't just say flat comparison T-55 will win, because the T-55 is going to have to. The T-55 only really stands a chance if it catches the Type 74s out of their environment, which is to say, in open country.
What are you talking about, fleet?
Like, if the Type 74s are moving between positions and a T-55 catches one, then the T-55 is going to nail it.
Can fire on the move at low speeds.
No, that isn't the issue. The entire primary issue is you are unlikely to see a T-55 in the Type 74. That requires an actual amphibious operation done by the Soviets to land T-55s in Japan.
I would also point out the fact that, look, I love T-55. It's my favorite mushroom-topped tank. But Type 74 has better fire control. The crew can fight in it better. It's more ergonomic. More mobile. It's just it's a tank I would rather fight in compared to even a fully updated T-55.
It's one of those. It's a better tank to fight in, but we're talking. Older T-55s, I'd agree with you, but the T-55 gets very nasty again when it gets modernized in the 70s.
It does, but...
And I wouldn't put it past some of the first-line Soviet units that are using it, who were very, very well trained.
Oh no, I'm not saying they're not. They were very well trained. The modernized T-55.
It was one of your comments about crew training, and it's like...
Oh, no, that was...
If it was a Warsaw Pact T-55, I would agree with you.
Oh no, that was more in relation to all things being equal. Equivalent tanks with equivalent crews. It wasn't a comment on the lack of training, because the Russians in the Warsaw Pact did train their tank crews to fairly decent standards.
It depends what echelon unit you are, to be honest.
Yeah, Category C. Category C unit be like, yes, I'm here for my 2-year refresher training. I'll be back again in 2 years.
Category C unit. So do I get a uniform, or am I getting an armband and civilian clothes?
Moving on. YouTube Minecraft Watcher asks, I remember someone asking me this, but which 3 admirals do you hate the most? Top 3 most hated. Personally, the names are as follows, in no particular order, which I assume is for him. Halsey, BT, and King. First things first, allow me to say that hate is a very strong word, and I wouldn't really reserve that for people I haven't personally met.
I would.
Hate's
not that strong a word these days.
I still maintain that it is, and I'd be very careful throwing it around.
I wouldn't.
Again,
Fleet. It's not the days of Hoshi's launch anymore.
No,
Anyway,
hate
changed. Moving on.
But admirals I dislike would be Jean Soul for his catastrophic handling of Mez El Kabir. Probably BT again for his failures of command in various engagements during the First World War. And probably my third pick would be I'm trying to think of admirals I dislike.
Giacchino, the Italian one.
Not really.
Kumo.
Not really.
Yes, I hate him. I hate
Well,
him.
I can speak for my Irish blood and give you an answer.
Go on.
Oliver motherfucking Cromwell.
Yeah, no, that scans. Yep, I'll slide that one in. Yeah, no, fair enough. That will. I will absolutely agree with that. Dislike that man.
Mr. Oliver Cromwell doing more damage to the Irish population than the potato famine.
Yeah, that man was. Yeah. So
he crowned himself Admiral of the Fleet and was the Admiral of the fleets that were doing the pacification of Ireland.
Yeah.
But
so, Dr. Clog, have you got three?
Republicans don't like to talk about him for some reason.
Admirals I hate.
I prefer the term dislike.
Dislike.
Like I say, hate's a strong word.
Strongly.
The trouble is it's limiting down to 3. BT's gonna be on there, but Chatfield's also pretty high up. I have honest issues with Mountbatten on occasion as well.
Which one?
Which one do you
Pick one.
Oh, yeah.
Winston Churchill?
Churchill was never an admiral.
I thought he was. Oh no, he was First Sea Lord, wasn't he?
Yes.
First Lord. First Sea Lord.
Because you're
First Lord of
British
the
and
Admiralty.
you can't have a straightforward social and political and military rank structure to save your bloomin' lives.
No, you can. The Lords of the Admiralty are the civilian lords, the Sea Lords are the naval lords. So if you're a minister, you're a Lord of the Admiralty. If you're a Sea Lord, you're a Lord of the Navy.
Churchill was.
I thought Churchill wasn't, because his position would have been an honorary admiral then.
No. It wasn't an honorary admiral. You didn't need to be an honorary admiral. You were a Lord of the Admiralty. He was given a yacht to wander around and watch fleet exercises. And that's why he doesn't need to also be made an admiral. But honestly, yeah, he's it's there's so many admirals also back in the Age of Sail. I could really go into a few of them, especially the Admiral of Graves at Chesapeake. He was an imbecile. But yeah, just too many for me.
So,
just too many.
Gunnery Officer on Discord asks, thoughts on the B-45 Tornado? Like the B-58, do you think it's a failure of a bomber and doesn't have any use in US service for its time of service? No, it's not a failure at all. The B-45 was the first jet bomber to see service with the United States Air Force. It was the first jet bomber they had that could carry nuclear weapons. It provided a valuable photo reconnaissance role after its days as a frontline bomber were done. And it paved the way for large multi-jet aircraft operations for the US Air Force that would serve them well as they inducted aircraft like the B-47 into their inventory.
Rude calling the Canberra a failure.
Well, the Canberra's not a failure.
Honestly,
like B-58.
Yeah, but didn't the US Air Force
The US
operate cameras?
No,
Yes,
he means B-58 Hustler.
Oh, the Hustler?
Yeah.
No, even the
That's good.
Hustler wasn't that bad. Honestly, the biggest thing for planes of the era is just the fact that jet technology develops so quickly. A lot of things that is made in the immediate post-440, late 40s era got outpaced fairly quickly, mostly because of new jet engine development and just a lot of new airframes and aerodynamic understandings that,
It paved the way as an aircraft. It paved the way for what was to follow. And it gave valuable experience.
So it's generally not fair looking at the surface life of those aircrafts.
Yeah.
It is just simply because they got replaced rather quickly because of technological developments.
And they did have.
I'll throw in the spanner, and that works my way.
Go for it.
The Canberra.
Well, the Canberra is the Canberra is an aircraft that's much later than the B-45. It is.
It's not.
No, it is.
No.
It's 3 years. It's 3 years.
Are you talking about Canberra in terms of British service?
Yes. It's 3 years. It's 3 years. And in 3 years, so much can change in that period.
Well, that's not it, though. You also have to consider the fact that...
In this case.
You also have to consider the fact that the US has so much more money to throw around for new toys.
And of course, the B-58 was also a extremely safe design.
You mean 45?
Sorry, yeah, the B-45 was an extremely safe and conservative design. But it was designed to be that way.
Which I think's part of the problem with it.
There is no problem with it. If everything's... If you consider...
too conservative.
I wish you two would get out of the mindset that if something isn't a world-beating, trailblazing, all-singing, all-dancing aircraft, that it's a failure.
What?
We've had this over the last 2 weeks.
When have we ever...
That's not fair.
That's not what we're like at all.
Well, to explain better, to actually give what it's saying, what we're trying to say is that it's easily arguable.
Arguable, you had it right first time.
Yeah.
It's easy to debate that aircraft suffers from being designed under arguably obsolete design principles of what a jet bomber will be.
That is a really good way of putting it.
I will point out
they approach it like they're building a propeller strategic bomber.
Yeah, but with...
Which is a very different animal to a jet bomber.
So, to give a bit of context here, the B-45 comes from the NA-130 proposal of 8th of September 1944, where they then started working, and also was developed after looking at the Arado 234 later. The Canberra formally begins in 1944 as well. The Canberra is explicitly under... which one is it? Initially begins as P1056, which they look at, and then you start looking at them later. Can't remember the exact specification it's applying for. But
yeah, I mean,
they both come from the same period and the same studies, but the Americans definitely get into jets eventually. But in my opinion, they're a little bit too hesitant with them to a degree. Also, I would also argue part of the problem is their jets are definitely not as good as the British ones initially. They do catch up pretty quickly, I will say.
I mean,
especially the early jets, you see the under, like for instance the P-49, is it, or is it
Beef? Do you mean?
P-49?
What do
no,
you...
I mean their first fighter jet they had.
Oh, the P-80, the P-80
Star.
Yeah, the P-80.
No, the P-50, the P-53, the
the Airacobra was
the whatever.
I know what you mean. Yeah, it's abysmal.
Comet. There we go. Air Comet.
Yeah, that thing was. Ooh, Jesus. The less said about it, the better.
That's my point, though, is that basically they don't have as powerful engines. I think that's probably part of the reason why you see them sticking 4 engines on instead of 2.
Yeah, but then of course you do get.
I do think personally I do personally think they tried playing it a bit too safe with the Tornado.
I think.
But also I also will agree with Fox that it also to a degree they are designed for different uses. The Canberra's origins are of a tactical bomber.
Yeah.
Because it's literally designed to, what if we replace Mosquito?
Yes, and they really did knock it out of the park.
B-45 is more a case of, well, let's try and make a semi-strategic
jet bomber,
but then let's give it tactical capabilities. But let's let it do this. Oh, well, we need more engines for this.
Yeah.
They play things too safe instead of just going, right, we want this, and we'll throw them. We have all this money, we can throw at these new toys, then let's throw them and go wild. Let them actually go nuts.
Although what it did do is it showed them...
that they're not as different as you think, though, in that way. Because I mean, it's personally, but how I conceptualize this is, it's not a replacement for the B-29. It's more a replacement for the B-25 in role.
I would probably,
Yeah, that's about right.
That multi-role, it can be a strategic bomber, it can be a tactical bomber.
It can do photo
reconnaissance.
reconnaissance.
You can put 1650 cals in the nose and go strafing people.
Yeah, well, that's something it didn't do. But
that's what B-25 did.
Well, yes, B-25 was just angry, and you were going to know about it. But one of the things that
the early designs for the Canberra, you see, they're very much in line with.
They know what they want. They know what they want.
I would say they don't, because it's very much a what if Mosquito with jet engines? What if Mosquito with jet engines? It's part of the reason why you get that 3 extra years is because there's sort of like a shift in the designs where someone has a bright idea going, but these jet engines are fundamentally different to the props we're using.
Yeah.
Air Ministry specification E.3/45.
Yeah.
Is when Canberra then started its slight change.
Yeah. I mean, what I will say is that Canberra was very much a platform that, as the times changed, as Dragon just said, the spec kind of changed with it. And so the airframe and what it was supposed to do could kind of grow with that. And you see it from the later flight time. It takes until 1951 for Canberra to come into RAF service, because it matures as the technology matures, as the requirements mature, and it comes out as a mature platform that knows exactly what it needs to do, that's very good at its job, that's leading the way in terms of what a jet bomber can be. Compared to B-45 Tornado that they build, it comes out, yes, it's a jet bomber, it can do jet bomber things, but it kind of, after a brief period, sort of, it doesn't really have staying potential like Canberra does.
Like, personally, because I never even actually stated if I consider it a failure or not before you slightly jumped at us for hating it. It's not a failure of a bomber.
Yeah,
it's just not a great one for it, period. And honestly, its contemporaries are arguably quite better in multiple ways.
I mean,
notably, Canberra is its closest contemporary.
I mean, it's just really just
IL-28's probably better than B-45.
It just really comes down to the fact that the US jet engine wasn't very good.
Yeah,
how I would say it is, I think you're all down the road. It's quite a good aircraft for an obsolete envisionment on how it's going to be used.
Yeah, although
it's obsolete for the role they wanted, but it's not a bad aircraft.
No. They did perform a useful role as the jet-powered nuclear frontline deterrent for the US for a bit in Europe, which was quite useful. And they did do reconnaissance flights over the Soviet Union, which were quite useful as well.
Also, well, I'll say my biggest thing against it is the same thing against all US early jet development.
Apart from
Their jet engines are really bad.
Yeah, when they get British jets, they can really knock it out of the park. P-80.
But the whole part of the thing is, even the US military, from what I'm finding, agreed that, these engines make this plane incredibly awkward to use and massively cuts its potential for future use.
Yeah.
I'm curious maybe what would have happened if you got better.
Honestly, give it the Canberra's engines. Yeah, give it the Canberra's engines. I'd love to see what that aircraft could have done.
You'd probably have to completely redesign the wing if you want to try and do Canberra style. But in general,
you get what I mean, though, don't you? Like engines that.
It is the thing I have. It's the issues I have with US early jet development. Is you have potential here, but unfortunately, as something that keeps annoying me through every time I listen through Rex's videos is, but this plane would have actually been very good. And they planned for the engine to give us this performance. The engine completely failed to meet performance standards. The engine completely failed to meet performance standards. The engine completely failed to meet performance standards is a repeated thing you hear constantly throughout US aircraft engines in general, honestly. Now, that's not to say the British don't as well.
Yeah.
But we managed to at least have a couple of basic ones to work with.
Yeah. Like there were some shenanigans that occurred with some of our aircraft.
Yeah,
we had some moments, didn't we, Dragon? We had some moments in the British.
I think the National Museum of the United States Air Force says it best.
Oh.
The B-45 was the World War II jet bomber that became nuclear.
Yeah. Also, what do people, just very quickly before we move on, I'd like to talk about the other jet bomber of the equivalent period. The one on the other side of the Iron Curtain. The IL-28.
Would it be the IL-28?
I mean, that as well, I think, compares very favourably with the B-45.
Pre or post the Rolls-Royce engine sale?
Post. Pre, it was a bit...
Huh. Now
post, it was using the same engine. It was using the BMW 003 and 004 engines.
I don't think the IL-28 flew with those engines in service.
It did it. It was a Soviet modification of them.
Are you talking about the IL-22?
Which engine? Sorry?
Yeah, Fox, I think you're talking about the IL-22. That never...
yes. The original IL-28 powered by the VK-1s. And I'm trying to see if they ever swapped from this. They did have the RM, which used the VK5, as well as the TM. But yeah, that's the only other versions I can see with different engines.
Yeah, I don't know how many IL-22s did they build. They just
no IL-28s was made with anything other than the Rolls-Royce Nays.
Yes, I am thinking of the 22. Never mind me.
Yeah. Well, the 22 was a useful test bed
because the 28 has the Soviet Rolls-Royce.
The Neens, the RD
engines.
Yeah, no, they have the Neens. The RD-45s.
Yeah.
And then the Tu-73 also had them. Yeah. Of course, then they realised why have 3-engine bomber when can have 2-engine bomber, and they adopted the IL-28 rather than the Tu-73. Still, it's
the thing I would be interested in hearing. Actually, I've just noticed would be actually hearing what the Royal Air Force's opinions of the B-45 were.
That would be.
They did operate around 30. Apparently, they operated 33 of them in total.
Oh yeah, when they were using them for photo recon.
So I'm slightly curious what their opinions of them were as well.
I would love to actually try and have a crack and dig and see if we can find any information on that at some point.
April 5th. Their stuff was special. Their quote unquote special duties.
Yeah.
Were primarily done in 52, so I don't know if that would be declassified yet.
Yeah, that's a nah. Why is all the fun stuff classified? I want to know what the Royal Air Force thought of the funny four-engine machine.
But on the IL-28, just comparing it to the IL-22 and what that was like, so its predecessor, it looks like a bloody good aircraft, and there's not much time between them.
Yeah. I think the IL-28 was what they wanted, but they didn't have the engines to make it work, and then suddenly the British rock up and say, would you like to have this? And suddenly Lucian goes, oh, I can build the bomber I want to build. Yippee!
Because I'm just looking at the TR1, and it's just like...
Yeah.
Technically, it's the first indigenous jet engine turbojet design.
Technically is doing a lot of work there, Foxo.
Yes. Just ignore the BMW engineers in the nearby Gulag.
Yes, ignore them. They're not here. We don't see them. You can't...
Interesting, it shared engines with the MiG-9 of all things. Which is... definitely something.
YouTube Minecraft Watcher asks... I feel like we've wrapped this up, lads, and last.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, we've...
That's why I was suggesting, do you want to grab the next question?
Yeah. We'll do... Let me see, so what time is it? How long have I been going?
It's
3
almost 9
hours,
o'clock.
almost on the nose.
3 hours, so we'll have this as the last question. It's a good, nice naval history question. Dr. Clark can finally use the cells in his brain to do something fun, rather than sitting here listening to us chew the fat about jet bombers.
Oh no, I was enjoying. I'm just letting Foxo demolish you most of the time, and just thought, well,
Hey, by the end of it,
she's doing a great job.
By the end of it, we'd managed to come round to a consensus. Like we usually do. We usually knock 7 bells out of each other in the opening salvos, then come round to a consensus. It works every time! It's brilliant.
By the end of
It would be nice, however, if you didn't try and rip each other's throats out with such glorious aplomb.
It's the opening salvos of any discussion between me and Foxo. It just kind of happens at times.
I'm sorry, Rui. We can either stab each other with word shivs, or we can get right down to it, or Birmingham special.
We both prefer the word shivs because it's nicer on the carpet.
The Birmingham special.
No, I would not survive the Birmingham special. I would be missed on the floor if she pulled out the Birmingham special. YouTube Minecraft Watcher asks,
it's a gammon bomb.
Yeah, it's December 25th, 1941, and somehow the US Marines from the Philippines have arrived in Pearl Harbor aboard a captured IJN Yamato. How would the Navy use it, upgrade it, convert it for American use? Funnily enough, we have had a similar question on Ramblings before, and I don't know if Dr. Clark was here for it, but I had a lengthy discussion about what the rebuild would be. No, Cyclic was here, and me and him chewed the fat over it for a good long while. And what we kind of came up with was, well, the 18-inch guns kind of have to go, because the US doesn't have ammunition for them, and their barrel life is... it's not good. The only question, the question that we basically then came to was, what are we replacing them with? Because I don't know if the US has 18-inch production it can spin up.
No.
What we came up with was you'd basically... The best and easiest option was 16-inch 50. Or at least 16-inch...
No, they can't. They have the 18-inch 48s that they can use. That have been already converted to 47s.
Oh no!
Do they have enough of them? Can they spin up? Can they spin up production?
No, sorry. Like
oh my lord! I can see it. The iron brew has been consumed.
And then he stopped.
Oh,
swing
it. Dear. Yeah, so I mean, you could use the 18-inch 47. I mean, it's possible, but I would think at that point, given ease of given the speed to bring it back into action,
put 16 inches on them.
Yeah, it's probably going to be 45 at first, and then they're gonna, when they go to swap the barrels out, they'll swap it to 50. Later on down the line, because you can make the hoists take probably 16-inch shells and ammunition. because it's easier to go down in caliber than it is to go up.
And they can also just store it in the turret and the barbette like they used to do in American ships anyway.
Yeah, because she's fundamentally immune to any Japanese gun that's going to be fired at her, unless it's her sister.
No, she's just immune. Yeah, okay, of course. It's her
How many
sister.
of these guns?
Obviously, all of the 6-inch guns are going to go. All of the 5-inch guns are going to go. All the 25mm is going to go. And think of the 5-inch 38 farm we can put on this ship. Oh, that's going to be fun. And then all of the... Since it's early war, you're probably looking at all of the Chicago piano at first, which is not much of an improvement over 25mm. But then those will...
Can I just answer a question of the meme lords?
Of course.
That little laugh Fleet did, can anyone pitch it up?
No, please.
I'd speed it up by 1.5 and put it over a
Why?
clip
Why?
of an otter chewing through wood.
Honestly, I'm not even mad. I want to see it. I'm not even mad. But anyway, so, alright, I can see Dr. Clark. He is staring intently. Let the man do his thing. And he's taking a drink.
Can you blame him?
It did.
Why would you do anything with it? What's the point?
Just use it for gunnery at Dahlgren. Just put it in the Potomac River and just use it as a target. That's the only
A
thing.
nice way. It's a war prize. You don't. Why would you? Because of this thing, you're not going to fit 18-inch guns to it because you'd have to restart your whole production line, and then your 18-inch guns aren't going to match their 18-inch guns. So you're rebuilding the entire, not just the turrets. You're rebuilding the entire barbette the turret's going to. So no point. You can go, well, we could use the 16-inch 50s. You could, but you're still going to have to redo the barbettes because, in the nicest way, the fundamental systems which support the 16-inch guns that the Americans work with are different.
Yeah.
And barrel life, yeah, that's something which happens to other people. So no, there is no way that you would do anything with that ship other than just maybe possibly cry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, comment. The specific for this question, unlike your previous answer to a different or to a slightly different question, it shows up in the Philippines in Christmas of 41.
No,
the war has already kicked off.
No, it's Pearl Harbor. It's arrived in Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Did they change it to Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, it's the U.S. Marines from the Philippines have arrived in Pearl Harbor, somehow having nicked off with the Yamato. I mean, it's the Marine Corps. Weirder things have happened.
How dare you change your question? All right.
But the thing is, it also specifically said how would the U.S. Navy use it, upgrade it, convert it. But the realistic circumstance is, as Dr. Clark says, it doesn't get any upgrades or conversions. It's basically the scenario for the U.S. that the British would have with a captured Bismarck. Examine it, tear it apart, find out what makes it tick, recycle the steel for use in the war effort. Basically.
Yeah.
Although it is gonna, although when they realise what it is gonna terrify the living bejesus out of them. Well, not terrify, but it's gonna go, oh, these are what the Japanese built. They aren't 50,000-ton, 16-inch armed ships. Right. I think we need the Montanas. Let's get on that. Get on that. Ring up the shipyard. I want 2 of them immediately. Like, expedite. Go. Pull the levers. Twist the buttons.
The dates were guide at that time. Pearl Harbor did just happen. Would they expedite Montana if they figure out what the Yamato is?
I mean, I'm waiting to see what Dr. Clark has to say because I'm actually curious. Would it lead?
That's actually honestly the only scenario where you could see that sort of thing happening is probably a scenario where they find out exactly what they're facing.
And which is this?
If they find out what they're facing, then they go, oh, that's not what we're expecting. Okay.
If the British get this information, what are we going to do? What can we do in 41?
Lion class get built.
I assume revised Lion as per 41.
No, as quickly as you can build it, frigating lion.
Yeah. Fair enough.
And build lots of them.
The British, in a nice way, the British already learnt that they suspected the Japanese were fitting 17-inch guns to their ships, which is what led to the King George V's having that armor growth.
Yeah. And now we figured out it's 18.1-inch guns. Isn't this fun?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And the British are going to presume they have more.
Yeah.
What did he do?
Because we imagined a series of supercruisers that didn't exist. As well.
We imagined all sorts of things which didn't exist.
Hey, it was good for funding. We were able to present all sorts
Oh,
of...
yeah. You know, that could be an amusing question I have to pose to you at some point then, Fleet.
What question?
Clearly, you get sent back in time to just before World War II starts, but you're only sent with popularist history.
Oh, for the love of God, no! No! Is it... Okay, is that... Do I know all my history, but I can only prove to them populist history?
Yeah, you know all your actual history, but you could anytime you try and talk about history, it's all the populist stuff.
Oh, good
Oh,
lord.
that's cruel.
That's
cruel.
That's horrific. That's not fair.
Yes, the Tiger tank is the war-winning weapon.
The Bismarck is the best battleship ever to sail the seven seas.
Don't worry, mein Führer. The 262 shall turn the tide as the bomber war.
Oh, the worst program I ever saw was a horrible alternate history program on the History Channel, and it was a low bar even for them. And it was the pilot episode. It didn't get anyone's after because of how bad it was. And it was how can the Germans win World War II? And the turning point was them not turning the 262 into a fighter bomber, so it was available on D-Day, and it was able to machine gun the beaches, and that changes things. Then the Germans build V2s with nukes in, and they're towed by Type 21s in the special containers across the Atlantic, and that apparently results in a victory over the US. And no mention is made of, I don't know, the massive horde of Soviet troops that way.
Yeah, they just froze.
No, those are already taken out by the Glocker.
I assume they've all been nuked.
Well, no, I assume they just forgot the Soviet Union exists.
Yeah, and then the weird thing is they basically go, they just, it's so American focused, it's not even funny. These people are trying to leave the US to avoid being persecuted. And, people figured out what went on in Europe with the Holocaust, and now they're protesting in a fascist state. And we know what fascist state, it shows like tanks and APCs rolling, and I'm like, the protests wouldn't even happen. If you have a stable Nazi government by the year 2000, the idea of a peaceful protest with placards will be so alien to people. It won't even enter into their consciousness. They will have had decades of indoctrination. The children of the people who were born after the war will know nothing else than the rule of the Reich.
I won't go that far, though. Because what were most of the protests that took down the Soviet Union?
Well,
those were mostly peaceful because even the most indoctrinated soldiers will struggle to fire on their own people who are unarmed.
There's a difference between the Soviet Union.
It's easy for someone to reinvent the idea of a protest from base principles.
It's not so much that they can't protest, that's not what I'm saying. The problem is that the discovery of what's gone on in Europe in regards to certain policies wouldn't cause any problems or unrest if discovered. They'd be like, oh, the government did what they've indoctrinated us into being a good thing. Oh, okay, carry on. It wouldn't cause any unrest. Given...
It would.
No. Why would it? Why would Nazis be upset about Nazis doing Nazi things?
Because the majority of people get really upset when you hear about a large amount of death.
It depends upon it is entirely dependent upon whether or not you view the people who died as your equals or even human. See the transatlantic slave trade.
It's just 3 decades of children, in fact 4, 5, 6, 7 decades of children coming through a National Socialist school system. It's gonna leave a certain sort of indoctrination on the populace and a certain culture on the populace. It showed a fundamental History Channel level, which is kind of funny because it was the History Channel, understanding of history. It was aggressively History Channel. It was ancient alien levels of shenanigans.
The cursed words, Fleet.
I mean, funny thing is, Ancient Aliens literally just...
Since I lost a bet, I had to watch all the seasons of it.
It literally just rips off Nadia Secret of Blue Water. That's all it does. They just watched the plot of Nadia and went, yes, we'll use this as the basis for our program. That's literally what they did.
Mindless fun. That's what it is.
Oh boy, Dr. Clark is giving me that look again.
Wait, seriously? What?
Yeah, they did. Aliens.
I'm listening to this all and going.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, wait, literally. Aliens crash land on Earth. Can't advance their civilization. Just stop me if this sounds familiar. Aliens crash land on Earth. Can't advance their civilization. Build humans. They fail. Try to build a race. They try the dolphins. Fail at first. Build humans. Then the aliens have infighting. Yeah, does that sound familiar? For turrets, that sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah, that you fill out government forms while I'm listening to this. I do not need more brain rot than necessary.
You're forgetting the best part
hang
of
on.
Ancient
Am I the
Aliens,
only
though.
person here, aside from Fleet, who's been inducted into the Nadia Club?
Yes, the rest of them are not
I
familiar.
have as well. But Fleet, you're forgetting the best part of Ancient Aliens.
Yeah.
When they repeatedly get schooled by historians.
Oh, yeah.
Because they keep forgetting the wheel exists. How did they get these perfectly flat, perfectly shaped, cute blocks to build the pyramids?
Wheel.
And I think in F-Series 5, where there's just a really annoyed historian who's just like, they had the wheel.
Oh, Knight has brought up the GOAT of History Channel shows, Dogfights, which actually has one of the best renditions of The Hunt for the Bismarck on television. Dogfights actually did The Hunt for the Bismarck really well.
You're forgetting the flagship of the History Channel, Fleet, Porn Stars.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Dr. Clark, have you ever seen...
I'm so hoping that's actually spelled P-O-R-N than P-A-W-N now.
Yeah, no,
Just
it's
because
porn
that'd
as
be
in
an
a pawn
improvement.
shop. As in when you sell stuff.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, Dogfights was a really good series, and it actually has the best rendition on television of The Hunt for the Bismarck.
For those of you
full
on
CGI,
YouTube,
it's well done.
Who can't see Dr. Clark, about 5 seconds ago, his body language was that of the most defeated individual I have ever seen.
You know what?
I can't see myself in the third person most.
It's very reassuring that Fleet can do it to Dr. Clark as well. It's not just a one-way street. It's reassuring that I can also inflict the mental pain.
It's not you doing it to me, though. It's the History Channel.
Yeah.
The quote.
The utilization of the History Channel to hurt Dr. Clark by
They
you.
can't. Apparently, they can't even be bloody creative about it. Like, come on.
Yeah, they literally ripped it straight from the...
Unless, there's enough actual history out there, why do they have to start inventing whole new stuff? Which no one asked for. It's not difficult.
But you see... I'm sorry, my
Get on
West
a
American
train in
viewers.
Europe,
We
you'll find
must
history.
know about the
Go to
secret
China.
Nazi submarines and the secret Nazi base in Antarctica.
Oi.
Why
That
would you
was
want
an
to set up a
ancient
base
base.
in Antarctica?
Don't
How
you-
would you supply it?
Don't you know? Don't you know? The Hollow Earth.
Because
The entrance is in Antarctica.
Once they found reference to a Nazi weather station in the Antarctic, which means the Nazis had a secret base in the Antarctic.
And the UFOs.
No,
UFOs
we knew
to
exactly
control
where it
them.
was. It was a key. It was a very useful asset because they were the most predictable people for us to predict when they were sending messages through to Nazi high command. So it allowed us to decode their communications. We were really annoyed when they abandoned that base. It made decoding their signals so much more difficult.
Yeah. Oh dear.
Yes, but you could remember the Nazis didn't know we were doing that. To them, it was a secret base.
Super secret
And
documents.
then you get like, the weird commando raids that they never tell you about, but we just know they went to really weird parts of the world. Which means that obviously there was a secret shadow war between the commandos and the Nazis.
Oh, and don't get me started on the whole expedition of Admiral Byrd to Antarctica. There's a whole myth about the fact that the reason they withdrew was because the UFOs forced them to go home. The Germans came out of their secret base with their UFOs and forced the Allies to go home. It's... Yeah, the History Channel has a lot to answer for.
Have you seen that episode where they were talking about how the V2 rocket was actually the first rocket to carry man into space?
Oh, don't even get me started.
Oh, and then it all started that whole moon-based conspiracy.
Guys,
bullshit.
the Horton H0299 is a stealth fighter.
The V2 was the first rocket to carry a living being beyond the atmosphere when it carried monkeys beyond the atmosphere in testing. Yes, that is actually true. The Americans did use a modified V2 to carry a monkey beyond the atmosphere, which surprised me as well. I didn't realize that they'd actually done anything like that with them. I thought they used them for ballistic missile testing, mostly.
They did all sorts of weird things to them.
Missile test if you try hard enough.
I mean, I guess this is what happens when you paperclip Werner von Braun.
Yes. Oh dear.
I have to.
The man wanted to go to space. Can you blame him? It doesn't matter which government he's working for. The man wants to go to space.
Yes.
You must admit, though, the Americans deciding randomly to put Robert Goddard and von Braun in the same room together.
Oh god, that was funny. That was...
Single-handedly, they invented a stable two-stage fuel. And
it's just, that was brilliant. Like,
the guy that worked with T-Stuff and the guy that wanted to use gasoline to get to space.
And they somehow just...
the fuel and foundation of modern rocketry.
Yeah, it's just... Well, what they did is they put the two insane men in one shed and hoped that something would happen before the shed exploded. They were right! Von Braun didn't pick to go to the UK, gunnery officer.
He was black bagged.
Yeah, he was voluntold.
No, not quite. Right. If you really want to, how it actually happened is basically, I think it's his brother or something, managed to find a West German scientist and basically went, not West German, found a, I don't know why I say West German, found a US soldier and basically went, we wish to surrender, please don't shoot us.
Yeah, that was the whole thing.
They were genuinely being closed in from both sides by the Soviets and the US, and they basically had a whole meeting amongst the team of, well, who do we surrender to? Do we surrender to the Soviets?
Nope.
Or the US?
It's we're going to the place that might let us see our families.
And also probably won't have us shot.
Yes. Good.
Rather important.
I would take America over
Oh, Steve!
any day.
Steve, that is beautiful. What a comment. Steve Clark says, Iron Sky is a historical documentary. Steve, that's beautiful.
Don't you know, Flate? We're all living in the Matrix because the true timeline is the Wolfenstein timeline.
Oh, God. Oh dear. Right, tell you what, I am gonna. So we have gone over. We had a nice little diversion on silly nonsense, which was a nice way to end it. So we've got plenty of plenty of questions for Friday. So that's going to be a fun Friday. And then of course, obviously tomorrow is Rule the Waves. Wednesday is Railroader. And then Thursdays, I am still leaving blank because I need to, at some point, gather Dr. Clark, Drac, and the shipyards together for a recording session of, I haven't yet decided the title yet, but where basically I put to them a series of 10 questions that ordinary people might ask about naval history, and we have a discussion on those questions from 3 decent naval historians and how they would answer them.
I'm now more worried about this having heard you've been watching something which claims to be a history channel, but is obviously a sci-fi show.
Yeah, that is the... Well, no, I haven't watched the History Channel in 25...
Reason, considering Drax been talking to you for longer than I'm starting to realize there might be a reason Drax been ducking this.
So for the record,
what do you mean ducking this? Ducking what?
I will say
it.
one thing.
I'll worry about those 10 questions. Maybe he's the history dragon up there to ensure that they actually 10 questions are actual history questions, and we're not dealing with.
Well, no, it's no, it's not. This is a proper thing that I'm working on.
Yeah.
Rather than I get the joke, Dr. Clark. It's funny, but this is only something I've been thinking about doing for the last 2 months.
Petch, no chance in hell we stole them first.
But
is this the same? Does anyone remember that History Channel documentary during the American Civil War, the animated one?
No.
Where instead of using Civil War era cannons, they used M116 howitzers.
We don't talk about it because we don't talk about
All
it.
right, I will actually say the History Channel used to actually be decent.
It's not been decent since 20.
Programs.
It's not been decent since 2012.
Fleet.
It's not been decent for most of the time. Most of us have been alive.
Yeah.
Oh no! Like honestly, in the late 2000s,
Don't
it
make
was
me
actually
feel
reasonable.
old.
It's still
Yes,
Don't make
those were
me-
ancient times.
Right. Don't make me feel
Those
old.
were ancient times. Tell us of the old stories beyond
I'll
the
have
Velvet
you
Empire.
know. I'm only quarter of a century in like 5 days. It's quarter of a
Hell,
century.
do you remember Lehman Russ?
Oh
Yes,
dear.
and him getting his ass kicked
Do you
by a
remember
lion.
when our Primarchs walked among us?
Ay. Right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Dr. Clark, for being here, as always. Always love to have Dr. Clark on. It's hilarious whenever we chew the fat. Thank you, Ruinon, for being here. Thank you, Sea Dotters. Thank you, Foxo. Thank you, Moe. Thank you, Turrets. Thank you, Conron. Thank you, Meta, for showing up at the last minute. Thank you, Richelieu. Thank you, Dragon. Foxo, do you want me to change it to Foxo's Campfire, or are you gonna? Or
I've got stuff to do tonight.
all right, so we will round this off. Right. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, YouTube chat. Obviously, please do tune in on Twitch tomorrow for Rule the Waves. We in the Confederate States Navy are continuing to bash the Royal Navy over the head with a sledgehammer. The sledgehammer being 20-inch guns.